Good evening, everyone, and I want to thank you again for joining us here in the auditorium and from home. Before we move into the legislative part of our meeting, I have a few announcements and recognitions. Every year we experience an exceptionally busy October in Atlanta Public Schools. We have so many events and recognitions, which means that October is a great opportunity for you to be part of the APS Journey of Transformation. First, I want to kick it over to my colleague, Cynthia Briscoe Brown, at large Seat 8, to recognize Ms. Thelma Thompson, an alumna of Booker T. Washington High School. Cynthia?
Good evening, and thank you for being patient, Ms. Thompson, and everyone who's here with her as we finished our community meeting. In APS, as I think you've heard tonight from many of our alumni, we know how our past informs our future. As both the child and the parent of APS alums, I appreciate the wisdom of our elders and their perspective on where Oral History Project to capture and record the recollections of treasured alumni, employees, parents, and students across the district so that we can make sure those last long after all of us are gone. But today, we have a special treat because we get to honor one of those treasures, who we believe is the oldest living alumna of Atlanta Public Schools. Thelma Louise Thompson, and she was very careful to make sure I knew that it was Thelma Louise Thompson, was born January 27th, 1917 in Lovejoy, Georgia. Her family moved to Atlanta when she was a small child. She is an honor graduate of the 1934 class of Booker T. Washington High School, which makes her a member of the 10th anniversary class of Booker T. Washington High School. And then she went to Morris Brown College, and she earned a master's in education from New York University in 1950. Mrs. Thompson was a high school educator for 30 years, 27 of which were at her beloved alma mater, Washington High School. During her tenure at Booker T. Washington High, she was a member of a team that developed a humanities program for APS. She served as chair of the Social Studies Department until her retirement in 1977. Mrs. Thompson was passionate about education her whole life and absolutely loved teaching young people. She traveled abroad extensively while participating in continuing education graduate programs and cultural studies, and she was always eager to share her experiences with her students. She may have retired from the classroom in 1977, which I have to say is the year before I graduated from high school, so she could have taught me. But she never stopped teaching. She would take every opportunity to teach her grandchildren and her great-grandchildren Black history, world history, and world affairs. Mrs. Thompson was married to Asbury A. Thompson, a World War II vet and also a graduate of Morris Brown, for 51 years until his death in 1999. She's got 2 children, 7 grandchildren, 9 great-grandchildren, and 5 great-great-grandchildren. She's also a lifetime member of Zeta Phi Beta sorority and an active member of Mount Calvary Baptist Church. Mrs. Thompson exemplifies the kind of loyalty and the kind of love that we want every graduate of Atlanta Public Schools to have for their school. We appreciate it when folks come back and give back to their schools and their students, and Mrs. Thompson has done that for generations and generations. Ms. Thompson, you inspire us to continue working as we move forward. And we have a plaque for you, and if we can go on down there, her daughter Cynthia James is also with us. And so if we could get Ms. Thompson and her family to come forward, and we could all take a picture.
Can the Booker T. Washington alums also come up, please?
I just wanted to quickly as we continue to honor her, I also wanted to recognize another Washington alum for her continued advocacy of Washington High School, and that's the president of the Washington Alumni Association, Valerie Williams. You can come up here really quickly. All right, a couple other announcements. I'll give folks a few minutes or a few seconds. All right, so as we continue, a couple announcements. This month is National Farm to School Month. I am proud to say that all APS lunch menus offer Georgia-grown organic cabbage and kale and other vegetables. Our nutrition department does such good work in making the farm to school connection that it has received numerous awards, including multiple Golden Radish Awards from the State Department of Agriculture. But they've gone one step further. This year, APS Nutrition, led by Dr. Marilyn Hughes, won the Platinum Radish. That sounds great. One of only 22 school districts in the state to be recognized with the Platinum Radish Award. That's how strong nutrition is in APS right now, and we extend them a huge congratulations for that work. While on the subject of nutrition, next week will be National School Lunch Week, when the district and school systems nationwide recognize the essential purpose of a school lunch. APS serves 155,000 meals each and every week. With the theme of APS School Lunch, What's on Your Playlist, our nutrition department is spotlighting healthy menu items offered daily to all students. On Thursday, October 17th, our school cafeterias will feature chicken and waffles and turkey ham and cheese quiche. On Friday, October 18th, the menu will include chicken gumbo. Every day, APS offers students a variety of fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and low-fat milk, all of which meets federal nutrition standards. Parents and students can follow the fun using the hashtags APSNSLW19 and hashtag APS Lunch Playlist. Next, I want to recognize that October is also National Principal Month. The American Federation of School Administrators, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, and the National Association of Secondary School Principals join forces every October to celebrate our nation's principals for their tireless dedication to their schools and the students that they serve. We are proud of all of our principals, but I want to highlight 3 women who were named as finalists for APS Principal of the Year. They are Robin Christian of Barack and Michelle Obama Academy, Audrey Sofianos of Morningside Elementary School, and Yolanda Washington of Coretta Scott King Young Women's Leadership Academy. We will find out who is the APS Principal of the Year at the APS Awards program on Tuesday, October 29th at the Delta Flight Museum. Last week, on Wednesday, October 2nd, we celebrated National Custodian Appreciation Day. I want to make a belated mention of this day because we really should acknowledge the great work of our custodians each and every day. A clean and safe school contributes greatly to the optimal learning environments for our children. And I don't think we do enough to recognize how much our custodians contribute to our vision and our mission. Thank you to all of them across the district, and we hope that they enjoyed that day and that week. Next, this week is Georgia Pre-K Week. We are recognizing this week where leaders from across the state, including my colleagues on the board and our superintendent, are visiting pre-K classrooms and reading to students. This enables them to experience firsthand the quality learning that takes place in pre-K classrooms and helps validate the numerous extensive studies that show that quality pre-kindergarten programs result in greater school success and an improved workforce. Our next 4 several occasions align with the work of our social and emotional learning and positive behavior supports that we are providing for whole child development. This month is also National Bullying Prevention Month, Character Counts Week from October 20th to October 26th. There is also National School Bus Safety Week from October 21st to October 25th. And there is Safe School Week from October 20th to October 26th. As far as National Bullying Prevention Month goes, for this campaign, we joined Love Our Children USA, which recognized a critical need to address the issue of bullying and cyberbullying, and created Stomp Out Bullying campaign. This campaign raises awareness that bullying continues to have devastating effects on our kids, such as school avoidance, loss of self-esteem, increased anxiety, and depression. On that same theme, I wanted to give my colleague Erica Mitchell a chance to acknowledge someone who she was going to recognize today, but unfortunately had to go a little while ago, Mr. Theo Ratcliffe. Erica?
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm a little under the weather, but former NBA player Theo Ratcliffe was here. He has a book called Theo the Hero, and it is really focused on anti-bullying. Theo, growing up, was bullied as a child, but he overcame that situation to become an NBA player, all-star player. He led the league in blocks. He played with the Atlanta Hawks, the Philadelphia 76ers, San Diego Spurs, Portland Trailblazers, and the Los Angeles Lakers. He also served as the president for the NBA Players Union for 13 years. He's done a lot of community engagement, and he came today to really give out the books to kids that were free, just to talk about how to overcome being bullied, but how to prevent this behavior from affecting our kids. But he had to leave because tonight the Hawks have their first game, and hopefully they can pull off a win because the Falcons didn't. So hopefully we can have a win.
Atlanta United did. So did the
Okay,
Braves.
well that's good.
Although the Braves,
Okay.
well,
Right.
I'll leave that there.
Got some love going on.
I appreciate that, Erica. Thank you for those words. Also, I mentioned that from October 21st to the 25th, That is National School Bus Safety Week. Nothing is more important than safety whenever we transport our students to and from school or provide transportation for field trips, school events, and athletic competitions. More than 3 years ago, our transportation department launched the Crossing Guard school bus arm system, which monitors traffic around buses and tickets. Training and avoid, deny, defend for students should an event occur in our schools. For my final announcement, I want to announce the formation of the LGBTQIA task force. As a district, we want to ensure that we have sufficient and equitable supports for all students, including those who identify themselves as members of the LGBTQIA community. This task force will make recommendations on opportunities, services, and partnerships for APS. I plan to bring names to the board at a future date, but intend that they include students, teachers, administrators, outside experts like elected officials, representative from Georgia Equality, and a representative from the Counter Narrative Project. I wanted to also note that the Atlanta Pride Parade will be held on Sunday, October 11th. And as always, our district always arrives in force for this parade and will do so again this year. Although this year we will also be doing the great work of the task force after the parade. I now invite Dr. Kastarfin to make her own remarks.
Great, thank you so much. Before I go into my official remarks, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight and for all that everyone's doing to ensure that APS lives its mission for college and career readiness. Part of that college and career readiness is making sure that kids graduate from high school, but that they also start off right. So tonight you've heard about two big things. First, pre-K week is this week. So you want to eliminate the achievement gap before it even starts. And that means that we invest in early childhood education to ensure that our kids get a quality effort at the very beginning of their brain development as much as possible. And then we end with graduation rates, which is in part what came out this last month related to our graduation data. So if you were here during the work session, you would have heard about all the great things happening in academics across APS. And fair enough, not everything is perfect, but there is progress and gains to be celebrated. There are people out on the front lines every day working incredibly hard to ensure that we are actualizing a vision so that students love to learn, educators inspire, teachers, families are engaged, and our community trusts our system. And I think that there's plenty of evidence out there that there's more pride and excitement about Atlanta Public Schools more than ever. So if you recall, we received a graduation rate of 77.9% for the cohort of 2019. That is an 18.8 percentage point increase from 51.9 in 2014. We also saw a slight decrease, but we did see that we graduated more students. And that's one of the most important things we can do. 2,506 students walked on time across the stage. That's more than any other class since 2012 when the state first adopted the cohort graduation rate as required by federal law. So this was an actual increase of 68 more students, and I can tell you that between our Phoenix Academy, formerly known as West End, and of course our high school principals who've been working really hard under the direction of Associate Superintendent Dan Sims, that is more than a feat to achieve. And we want to congratulate those schools that have greater rates than 90%. Coretta Scott King at 100%. Drew Secondary Charter School, 96.6%. Carver Early College at 92.6%. North Atlanta High School at 91.1%. And Grady High School at 90.4%. Additionally, there were 8 schools that achieved percentage point gains in increases compared to 2018. Of course, the largest increase was Coretta Scott King, and that's how they got to the 100% by achieving 6.5 percentage points in gains. Also, Forest Hill saw an increase. Carver STEAM, South Atlanta, Best Academy, Crim, Carver Early College, and Thurl High School as well. So it is, in October, it has indeed been a busy month. We have a lot going on, including work around our new strategic plan. We also have our budget process underway for fiscal year 2021. And as you've seen in our work session presentations today, many more things are going on. For example, the CEO of Invest Atlanta was here, and she talked about all the work going on in the city, but I wanted to highlight the Woodson Park project. We've been working on that since 2016. The district put in $18.5 million in this project, and they have raised $51 million to complement affordable housing, clean up the parks and green space, invest in arts, and to also have a YMCA and an early childhood center as part of the project. We want to thank them for being a great investor and a partner in all of this while we work to balance economic development with the needs of our schools. We have raised lots of questions about the pressure on our collectible digest, which is in part due to tax allocation districts, incentives, and abatements. But all of that work comes together in a way that does put real pressure on APS, but we've done a good job of giving some of those resources back to our taxpayers and homeowners, and we intend to work hard to continue to do that. The next presentation was led by the Deputy Superintendent, David Jernigan, who outlined all of the initiatives inside of our strategic plan under the pillar of academics. And in that, we heard about early learning, literacy, Georgia milestones, testing related to SAT, ACT, IB, and advanced placement tests, college and career readiness, and positive behavior supports. And all of these would be accomplishments against the Georgia standards of excellence. We also reviewed some of our signature program work and the turnaround strategy for the district and other key district supports. Angela King-Smith talked a lot about the future as it relates to the 2020-2025 strategic plan. She reviewed all of the needs assessments we've been able to collect along the way, including the cluster community conversations we've had as well, and explained the next steps for the big plan. And of course, no plan is able to be implemented without tying it to money and resources. So Lisa Bracken, the CFO, provided her monthly financial update along with a summary of the preliminary work that we're doing for fiscal year 2021 budget. If you've been following our budget work closely, you'll note that we're coming out on the other side, finally, of many, many challenges over the years. We had a recent recession. Well, when I first started, there was a mishap in the posting, and we had to hire back a bunch of positions that were not properly posted, so we had lots of personnel pressures. Then we had of course, the recession. Then we had the tax digest and all the impacts of the mess that had been created over the last couple of years. And then we've had lots of other important investments that we wanted to make, including turnaround efforts and making sure that we were investing in all of the new initiatives related to our strategic plan. So it's been a long road in that budget, but now we're starting to see growth in our fund balance for fiscal year 2020 from just 8% to 9.69%. And while we don't expect to use or grow the fund balance this fiscal year, we expect to restore the fund balance to a comfortable 12% if we were to receive the one-time fiscal year 2019 payment and recurrent payments due to Atlanta Public Schools on the negotiations from the Tax Allocation District intergovernmental agreement that was approved by this board and City Council and is due to us from the City of Atlanta. I should note that state law caps allowable fund balance of 15%, and we believe that with all of that done, we will be close but not exceeding the expectations that would then cause other consequences related to state rules and regulations. But we are on our way to building a healthy fund balance. But unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts of individual board members, we were not able to hold our September Budget Commission meeting. But Ms. Bracken, along with our team, and of course the chair of the Budget Commission, Nancy Meister, were able to put together enough of budget parameters as it relates to expenditures and revenue to be able to initiate the conversation at tonight's work session. So we did an overview of the fiscal year 2021 budget timeline and presented those draft parameters. We've raised as an administration questions that we believe the board needs to prepare to talk about on October 17th as it relates to the Budget Commission meeting, because we are using some of the old parameters and the general approach that we used to use. But if we're going to have additional conversations about equity, about funding the new strategic plan, about any other significant lift as it relates to issues that have been raised in recent weeks and months, then we need to be prepared to change those parameters. So those conversations started today. We'll summarize them in preparation for October 17th. I look forward to receiving feedback from the board in advance of that meeting to be able to inform those parameters. I want to congratulate the board and the district for a special award that we received last week. Under the state's requirement that every district in Georgia pick a new operating model, Atlanta Public Schools did that in school year 2015-16. And as part of that, for the last 5 years, we've been working to implement our new contract with the state. That system from the state, the foundation that leads that work, gave Atlanta Public Schools the Georgia Charter Operating Model System Leadership Award, honoring the district for leading the way as we evolved into our new operating model. When the district approved this new contract with the state in 2016, it gave APS broad flexibility and autonomy, along with increased accountability for student achievement. And the outcomes that we expect to see are tied to academic outcomes for students. It's also tied to more engagement and, more importantly, more innovation in spaces to give us and our schools on the front line, along with their governing teams, the opportunity to make a real difference because they are closest to the students they serve. Part of that application even included us rethinking all of our clusters, where every cluster now has a signature program, International Baccalaureate, College and Career Readiness, and STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. Each one of our clusters, our high schools picked one of those signature programs, and we backward mapped that into pre-K and kindergarten and brought it all the way back up through elementary and middle school so that all schools are working in the same direction if you're in that cluster. The whole new design gave us a kickstart and a lift to make some serious changes to change the narrative of APS to be one of flexibility, collaboration, innovation, and engagement that focuses on students and schools. The group not only honored APS, but it gave us a $10,000 check to continue that work. And if I understand, we are going to redirect that money to be able to support our college and career academy, if I remember correctly. So we're very excited about that. That will help us ensure that we have more graduates who are college and career ready. SAT scores and participation rates came out. We also received that from the College Board last week. And what really pops is that we had 90% of our graduates from the class of 2019 who took the test to 90% of the class took the test, which is up a dramatic 33 percentage points higher than the 57% from the class of 2018. You might be asking yourself, how did that happen? First, we have super cool partners like Achieve Atlanta, led by Tina Fernandez, and they teamed up with us and APS to ensure that we had what is called an SAT school day, in which students get to take the SAT in their own school on a school day so that there's no cost to them. They don't have to worry about transportation. They don't have to go to a new site that they don't recognize. They don't have to have all the other anxiety that you have around test taking, because you are with your peers and your friends and teachers and leaders who you trust and know. I want to thank our high school principals and our counselors for taking advantage of this opportunity. Achieve Atlanta paid for all the tests, removing the funding and transportation barriers that kids have. And we know that it's not as simple as just taking the test, but it is actually a real barrier for college going. You have to either do the ACT or the SAT to ensure that you actually get an opportunity to be considered by a college of your choice. I can't tell you how awesome this is. This is a real chip into our efforts to ensure that we bring more equity to APS, meaning all students have an opportunity now to have that SAT or SAT, and that means as a gateway exam, they do not have to worry about what it means to live the mission of the district. Now, these outcomes come at great risk, because the more kids you take, it will also mean you get a better sense of whether or not our students are prepared for the rigor of this test. And due to this massive increase, where nearly 900 more students took the test than last year, we saw that we had a slight decline in our performance on the test. It did drop about 50 points from 997 to 944. The state and national trends also showed slight decreases, but this is how transformation and why it is the hardest and the scariest when you're trying to do the right thing for all kids, especially students who have been disenfranchised from the complete school process. It means that APS has to open gateways that were previously closed, and it can be a double-edged sword when the first round of results come in. But we had to get kids through the gate, get used to getting access to the test, and now we want to work on ensuring that they get better scores on the test. So I want to thank everyone for taking the risk to be transparent, to be true to our mission, so that all of our kids can get access to college and careers of their choice. And last but not least, I wanted to once again invite everyone to come to the 2019 State of the District. We'll hold this year's address on Thursday, November 7th at the newly renovated Harper Archer Elementary School in the Douglas Cluster. We invite everyone, so whether you're a graduate of APS, a friend, a family member, someone who pays your taxes, or is just a resident in APS, or visiting Georgia, you're welcome to come and learn about Atlanta Public Schools and what we're doing to give kids choice-filled lives. This is going to be another chapter in the APS journey of transformation. It will be my 6th State of the District, and the theme is called Epic. We, as we always do, will showcase the best of what we do, which is all about our beautiful students, and we'll share, of course, the current state of progress, of our challenges, our highlights, and everything in between. So we'll start the day with a ribbon cutting for Harper Archer renovations, and we'll follow that up with tours, student work, performances, and we'll move into the State of the District. Remember the date, Thursday, November 7th. We hope to see everyone there. Mr. Chair, that concludes my remarks.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Starfin. Now, would you please present the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. For tonight's consent agenda, there are items 5.01 through 7.13 for your consideration.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda 5.01 through 7.13?
Second.
Been properly moved by Isha Collins, seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. Any discussion? Please open the vote. Thank you. We will now move forward with 8.01, which is the monthly budget adjustment. Is there a motion to approve the proposed adjustments to the FY 2020 budget? Been properly moved by Nancy Meister, seconded by Ishay Collins. Please open the vote. Or, sorry, any discussion? Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve and authorize agenda item 8.02 relating to the superintendent search, which would approve and authorize the execution of a contract to engage a facilitator for community input sessions related to the superintendent search at a cost not to exceed $25,000, to approve the attached timeline to the item for the superintendent search, and authorize the board chair to take all necessary steps that are appropriate to implement all aspects of this agenda item and attached timeline.
Second.
Been properly moved by Leslie Grant, seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. Is there discussion? Nancy?
Yeah, I would like to see if we could amend this a little bit, because I think all the voting on everything that we're going to do here needs to be done by the board. So in the recommended action, where it says to authorize the board chair, I'd like to see it say the board. And then at the end, at the bottom where it says, in addition, the Atlanta Board of Education seeks to engage a search firm to assist in selecting and hiring the next superintendent. I think it needs to say by a vote of the board. And I say all this to say that because when we did our first superintendent search when I was on the board back before Maria was here, we approved a timeline in public, we approved the position description in public, we sent out an RFP, we passed a resolution in public, we named organizations that were to appoint the people in the resolution, and there were 3 people on the board as well as the chair in that search committee. All of this was done in the public. We interviewed the search firms in the public right up here, and I think that we need to make sure that the board is transparent and open, and it's all done by the board.
So I think that there is a motion on the floor, but to address your concerns, the search firm would be selected by the board and interviewed by the board in public, and all the stuff that you talked about would happen. What this agenda item actually authorizes is for us to proceed with selecting a facilitator, and second, for us to continue in accordance with this timeline with issuing an RFI that would allow us to receive information from search firms, and then have the board interview those search firms to potentially engage them. So this item is not any different than what you're talking about.
Can you give me clarity on that, to authorize the board chair to take all steps necessary? Why wouldn't that be the whole board?
Because what we're trying to avoid is the step of issuing an FRI requiring a board vote just to do that. The step of looking for a facilitator for a $25,000 at most engagement, requiring the board to have another meeting to do that. It would not bypass the requirement that the board interview and hire a facilitator, or that we, like we talked about at the retreat 2 weeks ago, develop a profile publicly, develop an application publicly, develop potential questions for interviews publicly, and everything else that's on this agenda be publicly done, as we discussed 2 weeks ago. What we're trying to avoid is any necessity to have additional meetings to, 1, hire the facilitator, 2, issue the RFI specifically.
Well, I think that's sad that we all can't be involved in that, even if it requires additional meetings, because this is one of the biggest decisions that we make. So just want that on the record.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion?
I'm
Cynthia?
sorry, I'm going to ask you to clarify once again exactly what it is we are being asked to vote on, because I think it's important that we be clear about that.
Yep. We are being asked to vote on the authority to hire a facilitator, no more than $25,000. And as I've mentioned before, we're, per procurement policy, purchases under $45,000 or $25,000 historically requires up to two bids. The board would receive those bids and hire a facilitator. We would agree to a facilitator and move forward with that. Second thing is solely issuing an RFI so that we can then, as a board, vet search firms for potentially engaging them. I want to remind folks that 2 weeks ago during the retreat, this board agreed to serve as the search committee, the entire board. We were not going to be selecting specific members of the board to do that. We were going to do all this work as a board. So the authority is very narrow. Obviously, as board chair, I cannot do the rest of the items on this list.
And the facilitator is for the purpose of getting community input.
Correct.
That the facilitator and the search firm are different.
Correct. And if you recall, Leslie Grant asked Glenn Brock if he could serve as facilitator, and I quickly said he probably did not want to serve as a facilitator, nor would Nina or any of our lawyers want to serve as a facilitator. So this is solely for gathering feedback and compiling a survey that we can then send out to different stakeholders to ensure we're getting information that would be needed for the board to develop a profile, for the board to develop an application and proceed with those next steps.
And just one more thing, and that is to clarify that we are not planning to have a search committee where a few members of the board are appointed to it and certain community leaders are appointed to it and so forth and so on, that the board is going to be, the search firm will be structured, the search committee will be structured differently than it was in 2014 when I served on it.
Correct. That's what we agreed on
Okay.
2 weeks ago.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Candace, I think, had something, and then Isha.
Yeah, just to follow up on Cynthia's original question, is it fair to say, bless you, that there are three things that we're voting on here? One, the approval for the timeline.
Yep.
Two, approve execution of a contract to engage a facilitator for community input sessions that would happen this month.
Correct.
And three, to that the board may seek to engage a separate search firm to assist in selecting and hiring the next superintendent.
Well, we're authorizing it would be authorizing the RFI to do that. We would not be engaging a search firm through this vote because we don't have that.
And I'm just getting that from the last sentence of the executive summary of this item that says, in addition, the Atlanta Board of Education may seek to engage a search firm to assist in selecting and hiring the next
Correct.
superintendent.
Correct.
If I could just jump in and clarify, that does not obligate you to hire a search firm or any particular search firm. It's just an executive summary letting the public know that that is a possibility. It's referenced in your timeline to issue an RFI and then evaluate it as you normally would.
So the timeline is posted to this agenda item.
That's what I'm looking at is the timeline.
Yep.
So it's fairer to say that it's the two, that what we're voting on tonight are the two things I've already said.
Correct. The first two.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Oh, Ishay, I'm sorry.
I mean, I just had a quick, I was just reviewing the timeline as well, and I know it's considered a high-level, a final high-level timeline, but also just want to be open if there are any, thing like that this is not a firm, understand that it's not a firm timeline and that it is subject to change as things move forward into the process. So I just was noticing that, and Candace and I had the same questions.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Ishay. One of the things, this is guidance that we're using based on the information we received 2 weeks ago regarding best practices around the superintendent search. So obviously, some things may speed up. We may be able to do things faster than what's on this timeline. And in other areas, maybe longer. So this is not a hard, fast timeline. Any other questions, discussion? Okay. We can open the vote. Moving on to 9.01, resolution in support of partnering with the Georgia Department of Transportation and Atlanta City Council on Safe Routes to School program. Is there a motion to approve this agenda item?
Second.
Been properly moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. Any discussion?
I had like one question.
Yeah, while you think about that question, I want to remind folks that we did have a student pass away a couple weeks ago crossing a street on Hallowell, one of the major thoroughfares in this city, and there was no safe way for that student to cross the street and for dozens of our students to cross the street in that community. This resolution is intended to be a call of action for the board, for the school system, the Georgia Department of Education, and the City Council to work together to get safer routes for our students across the city. And there's one new initiative that was passed by the legislature that allows cameras to be installed in school zones that would ticket drivers speeding through school zones. City Council passed a resolution a couple weeks ago calling for that program to be implemented, and this resolution supports that call. But it also calls on the Georgia Department of Transportation and the Atlanta City Council to work with us to develop safer routes, including crosswalks, and whatever is necessary to ensure our students are getting to school safely. Ishay?
I think that's, thank you for that summary. I think looking at this and reading this, I remember we embarked on this conversation a few years ago where we as a system installed the cameras on buses and even like petitioned with the city in installing the flashers at that time. And so I think for me, I'd just be very interested in following this closely to see what movement will happen along with the funding that should accompany this, because I know that was a hurdle we continue to a wall that we continue to bump into in regards to who, who was going to pay for it. And it was clear, like, if it's a public street or a city, DOT type thing, that funding should have been allocated that way. So just curious about the conversations that are happening after this passes.
Thank you, Isha. We'll definitely have to keep a close eye on that. Any other questions, discussion, comment? All right. Let's open that vote. Okay. Can we have a report out from the community meeting? No, sorry, executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I request a motion that the Atlanta Board of Education accept the tribunal's findings of fact and recommendation dated August 22nd, 2019, to terminate the employment of Adrian Gay.
Second.
It's been properly moved by Leslie Grant, seconded by Isha Collins. Let's open the vote. Not present.
And Mr. Chair, I request a motion that the Atlanta Board of Education uphold the hearing officer's finding of fact in Student Appeal 2019-12.
Can I get a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Properly moved by Cynthia Briscoe Brown, seconded by Leslie Grant. Any discussion? Open vote. Thank you. And now we'll move into the report out from the community meeting. Isha? Or Vice Chair Collins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight we had 26 community members to speak before the board. We heard expression of disappointment on the board decision to not renew the superintendent's contract and the need to extend the contract. Concerns in regards to engaging in respectful dialogue on the board's decision to remove chaos and to just make sure that the board and the superintendent just continue to have fruitful dialogue and respectful dialogue moving forward. In addition to that, we also heard community members express support for the board decision to not renew and to ensure that the superintendent search process was transparent, inclusive, and include strong community involvement, that there were ideas on the superintendent search ranging from job description, composition of the search committee, and additional feedback from the community. And being a part of that process, David T. want to recognize David T. Howard alumni that also support, was present tonight to express support for Dr. Kostarfin and her support of the David T. Howard facility and the community as well. We heard about information on the youth program to combat the school to prison pipeline, along with Thanksgiving to Dr. Kostarfin, Yolanda Brown, Dan Sims, and Waukesha Howe. And they were also given stoles in support of Booker T. Washington High School 95th birthday. We received thanks from Delta and Kaboom for the new playground that exists at KIPP Seoul and the groundbreaking that will take place at KIPP Atlanta Collegiate on tomorrow. AFSCME, members from AFSCME not only thanked everyone's participation for the Kimberly and Dunbar 5K on September 28th, in which they were able to raise $15,000, but also along with members of FPSE expressing support for the superintendent's contract extension. In all, various parents groups, individual parents, along with the parent group of Atlanta Thrive, stress the need as for the strategic plan and the upcoming budget meetings to make sure these conversations address achievement gaps and to complete the strategic planning process. In addition to looking at our literacy issues between grades 6 through 12. Making sure, and last but not least, parents from Washington High School softball team expressed concern about the fight that took place at South Atlanta High School and wanted to ensure that we increase safety and security for our students at all games. And Mr. Chair, that concludes tonight's community meeting.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Collins. Also wanted to announce, I should have mentioned this earlier, community engagement dates related to the search process. The first meeting will be on October 22nd, 2019, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Tuskegee Airmen Global Academy. The second meeting will be on October 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Gideon's Elementary. The third will be on October 28th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Bolton Academy. And the fourth will be on October 30th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Benteen Elementary. My apologies, I should have mentioned that earlier. We'll continue on to reporting out from board committees. Let's start with audit.
We don't have a report this month. We did not have a meeting last month, and will not have audits completed in time for a meeting this coming month. So our next month meeting will be in November. But I do want to let the public know that all of our current audits are up online under the board tab under Office of Internal Compliance. You can check there, and if you need anything else, please let us know. Thank you.
From policy?
We submitted 2 policies on final approval tonight.
Through the 29th, myself, Board Member Collins, and Estevez attended Council of Urban Boards of Education Conference in Miami, Florida. I had the opportunity as a steering committee member present the domestic minor sex trafficking policy and protocol to other urban boards of education. I also was appointed to the Council of Urban Boards of Education Policy Committee, so I will be working with the different board members across the nation regarding advocating and supporting different policies for our school system. Overall, I visit the PACE Center for Girls program that they have in Miami, Florida, which is really more parent and relationship building with the young girls that are having trouble in school and outside of school. It's a more trauma-informed, holistic approach to changing around their behavior so that they can be successful in their academic studies in school. I also had an opportunity to meet with the Miami-Dade County Public School Board and Superintendent regarding some of the achievements of Miami-Dade school system. Overall, I believe it was a great conference, so I'll let you all report out too as well. I'm done.
Great, and as Erica mentioned, I was there as well and presented on some of our board resolutions and policy relating to immigrant families and language access and creating a welcoming environment in our schools. It was great to spend time with other school board members and superintendents from across the country and learn from each other. With that, can I get a motion to adjourn? Been properly moved by Ishay Collins, seconded by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. The official. Good afternoon, everyone. We will now call the October 7th, 2019 board meeting to order. Mr. Gaither, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Representing Educational District 1, Ms. Leslie Bryant. Representing Educational District 3, Ms. Michelle Olympiadis. Representing Educational District 5, Ms. Erica Mitchell.
Present.
Representing Educational District at Large Seat 8, Ms. Cynthia Briscoe Brown.
Present.
Representing Educational District at Large Seat 9 and Chair, Mr. Jason Estevez.
Present.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gaither. I will now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the September 3rd board meeting.
So moved.
Been properly moved by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. Is there a second?
Second.
Been seconded by Michelle Olympiadis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the October 7th board meeting agenda?
So moved.
It's been properly moved by Cynthia Briscoe Brown. Is there a second? It's been seconded by Erica Mitchell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We will now move into presentations and discussion. So, Dr. Kasarfin, will you please bring the work session items?
I thought you were going to say something else. Okay.
Nope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and board members and community. Tonight we have 4 presentations. We'd like to invite Invest Atlanta up to the podium. They are the development authority for the city of Atlanta, not to be confused with the development authority of Fulton County. There are 2 that are able to use the Atlanta Public Schools tax base for part of its work on development. And so this one is the city version. And it'll be followed by David Jernigan, the Deputy Superintendent, who'll provide an extensive update on our academic programs. That'll include positive behavior strategies, early learning, the Georgia Standards for Excellence, signature programming, college and career readiness, school turnaround, and our recent 2019 graduation results, followed by the Chief Engagement Officer, Angela King-Smith, who will give you an update on the strategic plan for 2020-25. Then Lisa Bracken, the CFO, will close out our presentations with the fiscal year 2020 General Fund monthly financial update and a presentation regarding the parameters for fiscal year 2021 as it relates to the budget. So for our first presentation, we have Dr. Eloisa Clementish. who is the president and CEO of Invest Atlanta. We've spent a lot of time talking about all of the tax allocation districts and all of the things that touch Atlanta Public Schools, but you also have a slightly broader presentation to give people a sense of kind of what you do and how that relates to APS. So welcome. We're excited to have you, and please leave some time for questions after your presentation.
There we go. Sorry about that. So yes, it's an honor for me to be here, and it's very exciting that we're able to continue to work together to grow the economy and here in the city of Atlanta. So the focus, as Dr. Kosarfin mentioned, really is going to be to provide a brief history, some of our programs and initiatives that we have at Invest Atlanta. Then I'm going to talk about some of our future and focus efforts, and then open it up for time for questions. So just real quickly, economic climate. So from December 2007 to 2009, we remember this being one of the toughest economic crises that hit our economy. And just to remind folks, in 2010, that year alone, Georgia lost 5,600 jobs. We had over 20,000 bankruptcies, and we had hit the highest level of unemployment in the state at 10.7%. So there was a huge focus on how we can continue to help stimulate the economy. At the time, Invest Atlanta was then, as many of you may know us, by the Atlanta Development Authority. And the Atlanta Development Authority really focused on what was community development. So we had the housing initiatives that we have, which is low-income tax credits. We also had commercial corridor redevelopment, and then our tax allocation districts. Those were the main focus that we would focus on to try to help spur the economy. It was at that time that we noticed that we really needed to broaden that base, not only continue what we were doing, because community development is very important, but we also needed to have a focus on economic development. And really, truly, Invest Atlanta is the only entity that focuses on economic development for the city of Atlanta. So hence, today, we are the Invest Atlanta, which has the economic development side of the house and now the community development side of the house. I love to say this is really our secret sauce for the city. The fact that we can do both of these together under one roof really allows us to be able to coordinate, to be able to leverage off of each other, and to really provide those long-term impacts that we all like to see in our city. So as a result, we added the economic development side, business attraction. So that's when you see us welcoming these new big companies to the city, but business retention, innovation entrepreneurship, small business development, and creative industries, innovation entrepreneurship. And I'll go into each of those briefly. With that came the opportunity to expand the toolkit, right? Making sure that we're able to provide the best resource for what is needed at the time. So those in red, you just see, I highlighted those in red just so you could see the new tools that came on board when we really had a concerted and focused effort on trying to spur economic growth, specifically in the city of Atlanta. And I'll be able to go into any of those in particular, but I am going to show you the examples on how we use them. So what we've seen is this new business attention and business attraction tool, the fact that we have a team dedicated out there representing Atlanta. And when we talk, we're talking not only compete against us nationally, but what are we competing internationally to really promote the city of Atlanta? We've been very successful. We focus on our key clusters, fintech, headquarters, advanced logistics, health information technology, mobility. These are areas, cybersecurity, film and television, that we are spending a lot of our time and focus to attract these type of companies and to build up these type of companies in our city. Business retention is super crucial to what we do. We know that 70% of your net job gain in your city is going to come from your current companies. So what are you doing to ensure that your current companies are strong? And so what we do is we support them with not only our small business lending tool, we will provide some export if they're interested in exporting their products outside of the city. We can also do other incentives potentially to help them grow if they want to grow their manufacturing facilities here in the city, and just really serve as an advocate for small businesses and businesses here in our city so they can continue to grow and hire individuals in our city. As a result, we've been able to have, and we'll call them wins. A win for us is anything we've touched, influenced, or played a role in. And so we've had over 114 wins, representing 13,000 jobs that we've been able to touch, influence, and ensure that they stayed here in the city of Atlanta. So moving on to the next pillar of our focus is this innovation entrepreneurship. I cannot put emphasis on this enough. As you know, it's very important for your city to be thinking about what's next. Small Business Administration will say the average businesses open and close their doors every 7 years. So what are we doing to create that pipeline to ensure that we're providing the amenities to the community, who's coming up next, and how we're continuing to ensure that we have a robust economy where people have the retail services that they need, but also to ensure that we are thinking about the next brand new next technology. How are our companies being competitive nationally and internationally? And that's why we spend a lot of time. On this one, we'll create really exciting tools. This is what I love most about Invest Atlanta, is that there was a need that we saw. We said we have our startups who definitely need to have people support, but don't have the funding to support them, and yet our students, specifically our college students, they're after getting recruited once they're finishing college. So what we did is we created a program called Student to Startups. It was a second-year pilot. Well, we paid 2/3, 1/3 of that student salary so that we not only help the startup community, but we're helping keep our students in our city. So this is one of those programs that we're really excited about, us being able to leverage, being able to coordinate, and being able to create awesome programs. In our small business lending, so one of the biggest challenges that we see is access to capital. So we also have about 10 loan portfolios in our at Invest Atlanta. So we make sure that we can provide good loans to small businesses in our city. And here gives you a sense of the type of businesses that we've been able to loan to. I hope some of those you've been to, Nonstop, Spotted Trotter, in our city, and they're in these clusters. I will also talk about our community development. We had a facade improvement program. What are we doing to help with the facades of our businesses so that local community can come to some of those businesses along our key corridors? This is the type of investments that we've been able to make. First, we've been able to invest through our Amy arm in the YMCA, Sheltering Arms. These are groups that I know you're very familiar with. Families First, Grady Health Center, Woodson Park Academy. We just recently were at the groundbreaking for that one, and Westside Works. These are the type of different programs on our community side that we're able to come in. And what's so exciting on the Westside Works is Westside Works has been able to train at least over 375 residents from the community that are now generating over $5 million in total wages for their local community. So these are real programs that are making huge impacts in our city. Affordable housing. This is an area I know we all been focused on. We know that in Atlanta or in the South, we are one of the regions where rents have continued to increase at a higher rate, about 24% in other southern cities. We know that about 34% of Atlanta residents are cost burdened. That means they're paying about 30% or more for rent. And we know we have a growing population of seniors. Affordable housing is crucial. And yet we're seeing a lot of cutbacks on the federal side. So we have been able to, and again, could not do it without support of APS, is we issue tax-exempt bonds, lease purchase bond, and TAD to ensure that we have affordable housing in our city. And this gives you just a highlight of some of the projects and what type of projects we are focused on. So out of all the units that we've been able to support, 62% of our units are affordable and 38% at market. We want to make sure that we have that balance of both market and affordable housing. On our down payment assistance program, this is an area we want to ensure that people can live in our city. So we will offer anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 of down payment assistance for our home buyers to call Atlanta home. So if you haven't been able to, or if anybody watching has any questions, please reach out to Invest Atlanta. But we also have been talking about what are we doing to ensure that our residents are here, that they're not being displaced. And I'm happy to say that with council support, we have an anti-displacement program. We're actually investing $35,000 per home to come and do health and safety repairs. So we're fixing leaking roofs, taking care of lead paint so that we can have a lot of our residents continue to stay in place. This has been very important. We've done 55 homes. We've got 155 in the pipeline. So I'll close with our economic output really has been successful. We've been able to support 51,000 jobs, over 110 small businesses, home buyers assistance over 1,148. So this has been a great opportunity for us to continue to support the job creation, as you see here on this slide, and the total capital investment. And I said this, but let me close with this one, and then I'll open to questions. Where are we going in the future? One is an economic mobility study. This is the first time that this city has taken on an economic development strategy focused on economic mobility. How are we ensuring that this is an Atlanta for everyone? In the South Side, we have about 34,000 businesses that, through their sales, are producing about $4 billion in revenues. What are we doing to ensure that our legacy businesses in the South Side continue to thrive? PACE is an opportunity for us to be able to find alternative energy programming and financing. But the last is WorkSource Atlanta. When we talk about the pillars in the house, we had community development, economic development. I'm super excited about the opportunity to add on under that is WorkSource, the ability to integrate, because what we recognize is we could never build enough affordable housing to meet the need. What we have to do is get people from needing affordable housing to no longer needing it, and the way to do it is to upskill them with a job, with a skill set, so they can get a higher paid job. So really excited about the opportunity to integrate WorkSource Atlanta into Invest Atlanta. So with that, I'd open it up to any questions, and again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
And thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Questions from board members? Leslie?
I want to take a quick second to say I really appreciate the work of our colleague, Michelle Olympiadis, who does sit on your board as well. We have a seat on that has, I think, been really utilized in a much more active fashion of late. And with the WorkSource Atlanta and our new career center that we're opening up in the Pittsburgh community for our students, going through those career pipelines, I think any opportunities to be more collaborative with all of our partners is much welcome. And I know that Michelle's working hard to make sure that those connections happen. So anyway, thank you for presenting. And I'm going to give you a quick compliment because I've been looking at your website while you're talking, not to ignore your PowerPoint, but very well presented. It's very easy to find the information, so kudos on that.
All right, thank you. I'm sure Matt, who happens to be here in charge of the
Thanks,
website,
Matt.
appreciates that comment.
Michelle?
Eloise, I just want to thank you so very much. And I want you to quickly highlight the placement program that you did with the public school students. It was an email back in the spring where we were able to give them some internship opportunities, I believe it was, and you worked with our partnership department. Will you speak quickly about that?
Yeah, so that was in particular, is it the Student to Startup program? So there are several times that we try to work with APS. First is if new companies come to the city, we try to make sure that they have internship opportunities with with APS in particular for students. So we'll work with them. And in this case, the Students to Startups will find opportunity for students to be able to find internships and actually get them paid. So paid internship opportunities. And then we ourselves have an intern in our office.
Thank
From
you. Grady. And thank you, Matt, as well, for coming down and being with us today.
I really appreciate you coming out and look forward to more partnership between our entity and yours. I do have a question about how closely you work with, Dr. Kasarfin mentioned the Fulton County Development Authority. How closely do y'all work together on projects in the city?
We don't work very closely in terms of if a project comes into them, they don't brief us or let us know what projects they're evaluating. So unless there's a specific question, if it's not in our TAD, then I probably won't know about it until I read about it in the paper or I see it on their agenda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Hey, I just wanted to say thanks again. But to that point about the Development Authority for Fulton County, I sat on that board, and you and I were in communication about trying to message around how to work better together, or I know that you sent a letter directly to them. Can you tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
why you sent the letter, what the letter was about, and any recommendation you would have for how the structure for the city of Atlanta should be designed?
Yeah. Well, the purpose of the letter was really just to say, look, if we've got policies at Invest Atlanta, we want to make sure that it's the same no matter where you go. So if you're going to go to Fulton County, or if you come here at Invest Atlanta, that it's the same tool. Because we often hear that they'll go to Fulton County because either it's preference or maybe some of the same requirements aren't held at the same standard we hold them at Invest Atlanta. So we wanted to make sure that there was parity. And secondly, we said, well, we can do this tool already. We have the expertise. As you've seen, we have the community development side of the house. It makes sense. Why can't we just, if it's in the city of Atlanta, allow us to make sure that we could see it? And the third, I would say, is because we have representation of all the taxing jurisdictions on our board. And so all the taxing jurisdictions can have a say in the project. So I'd say those are the main things why I sent that letter. I would just say in the future, I think it makes sense that if we can do the lease purchase, that we'd be the ones that be able to issue all lease purchases in the city of Atlanta.
And was there a response to the letter that gives you any encouragement that that they will indeed accept the standards set by Invest Atlanta or address any of the other issues you raised?
We did receive a response, and they did address some of the issues concerns that we had about affordable housing in terms of compliance, which was good. I would just say that I think the compliance that we do in Invest Atlanta is a little, we check yearly. We actually go out, someone verifies, we look at the site. So I think our compliance is probably a little more extensive. But I think there's an opportunity for us to really focus on making sure all the lease purchases are done at Invest Atlanta.
And do you believe that it is okay to keep 2 development authorities, or should there just be one? What is the position of the
At Invest Atlanta, I mean, the law is pretty clear currently. There can be, so I would just say or what we would like to see is one authority that can issue lease purchase bonds in the city.
Right, and then my second thing is about the Woodson Park Academy, the $51 million project that you've been working closely with Atlanta Public Schools, the Woodson Park Foundation. I think it's SunTrust and Invest Atlanta are kind of like the key. YMCA as well. And so can you talk a little bit about that project?
Yes.
APS put $18.5 million in it for our portion of the school, but can you highlight for the public what the project is and why Invest Atlanta is a partner in it?
So these are one of those that are really exciting for us because we want to make sure that we're making investments in projects that are really going to be able to impact the community. We really feel that Woodson School would be able to do, Woodson Park Academy will be able to do that. Specifically, one, it's in Grove Park, so it's definitely an area that we're focused on and trying to see how we can continue to grow and stimulate the economy there. Second, it's going to be operated by KIPP. It's my understanding that'd be open to any student in the district. It's by a YMCA, so we're going to be able to really capture the student before and after, so the entire life of the student. We're excited about that opportunity. And then it's my understanding it'll serve about 900 children from K through 8. So these are the type of projects that we definitely like to invest in, because not only are we helping to secure the children for today, but these individuals will then grow and be great neighbors in the future as well.
That's great. Just one small clarification. It is not a charter school, and it will have an attendance area. So it's serving the neighborhood of Grove Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Thank you.
Education expert.
I think that's it. I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Do you want to recognize your team?
Yeah, so I've Matt Fote, who's with marketing, who did the website. So thank you, Matt.
Hi, Matt. Thanks for coming out. All right. Thank you so much.
David Jernigan will do the academic program update.
Great. Good afternoon, Dr. Karsarth and the board members.
Good afternoon.
Today, I will provide you with a high-level review of our academic performance, share some key updates on our strategic initiatives, and we'll wrap up with an overview of our strategic support priority for this school year. Given the scope of this work, you've seen the number of slides I have today, and the time constraints we face. I'm going to be moving relatively quickly through the slides, but I do encourage you and the public to review the full details in board docs, because there's a lot of really good stuff and a lot of stuff to brag on from our team in these slides. As you all know, strengthening our academic program is the first pillar of our strategic plan. And as a reminder, the academic program has 6 primary strategic initiatives. It's positive behavior strategies, early childhood, Georgia Performance Standards support, signature programs, college and career access strategies, and school turnaround. So after reviewing our academic performance, I will do a deep dive in each of these 6 areas. So we'll start first with a high-level overview of our academic performance, beginning with pre-K. As I shared with you last October when I presented a similar presentation, we currently closely track 2 key assessments in pre-K to assess kindergarten readiness. We know, of course, that academic measures are only part of what we need to be measuring for readiness, which also includes the physical and social and emotional development of children, as well as the students' approach to learning. The first assessment is PALS, which stands for the Phonological Awareness Literacy Screening, which we've had in place now across pre-K classes for the past 3 years. As you can see, this assessment is focused on very concrete skills, including the identification of beginning sounds, awareness of print words, alphabet knowledge, etc. Approximately 85% of students fell in or above the developmental range on this assessment in the spring. The other assessment we use is to measure the progress of our pre-K students towards readiness is called STAR. This includes both math and literacy across grade levels, and it can be used to assess growth, and it's administered 3 times a year. This graph shows our district averages for the school year 17 to school year 19, and you can see the growth from fall through spring year over year. Of course, the assessments with which you are most familiar are the Georgia Milestones Integrated End of Course Assessments. As you know, we achieved our highest rates of proficiency on the Georgia Milestones in 2019 since the assessment was first implemented, with our students showing improvement in 21 out of 24 of the Integrated End of Course tests. While we're still in the early stages of IB implementation across the district, we are closely monitoring our success with IB exams. Last year, students took 1,083 exams and passed 53% of them with a score of 4 or higher. As we continue to focus on rigorous instruction, we're also closely monitoring our progress on the advanced placement test. As you can see, after the district began paying for the AP exams in the spring of 2017, we have a significant increase in the number of AP tests administered. In 2019, 35% of APS taken were passed with a score of 3, 4, or 5, up from 34% in 2018. So recently, the district released our latest SAT scores, you all have probably seen, and celebrated the fact that we have made the SAT accessible to all students in the district through our annual SAT Day for juniors, resulting in about 90% of graduates taking the test. With nearly 900 more students taking the test this year who otherwise likely would not have registered, we're not surprised to see our results slip a little bit in 2019 with an average score of 944 compared to 997 in 2018. And while we do not yet have our 2019 ACT data for the district, I can share that in 2018, we also saw more APS graduates taking the ACT, which has been increasing every year since 2014. In 2018, we did see a slight decline across all subject areas for the ACT. For context, the average state composite score in 2018 was 21.4 compared to our average score of 18.7. A couple of weeks ago, the state released the 2019 graduation rates for schools across Georgia. And as you know, we've seen an 18.8 percentage point increase in our graduation rate since 2014, with a 77.9% grad rate for the class of 2019, representing a 2 percentage point decline from our all-time high in 2018. We're especially proud of some of our schools that have made considerable progress with their high school graduation rates, including Coretta Scott King Young Women's Leadership Academy, which posted a 100% graduation rate this year, Carver Early College, which improved to 92.6%, South Atlanta High School, which hit 87.9%, and Thurl High School, which achieved an 87% graduation rate. In the past 4 years, APS has increased the number of students seamlessly enrolling at post-secondary institutions by 11 percentage points, from 51% to 62%. School year 19 enrollment has not yet been released. The increase may be attributed to strengthening and aligning high school supports, identifying and implementing college persistence and completion strategies, and partnering with Achieve Atlanta via the College Advising Corps in one goal to provide additional college advising to our students. Dual enrollment opportunities continue to be an option for students, with 596 students participating in 2019. And collectively, the class of 2019 earned more scholarship dollars than any previous senior class. The class of 2019 earned a total of $161 million. In partnership with Achieve Atlanta, 1,077 seniors from the class of 2019 were eligible for the Achieve Atlanta Scholarship, and we estimated Achieve Atlanta supporting these scholars at upwards of $12.45 million over their college careers. Last year, the total number of CTA pathway completers increased to 1,097, representing over 12% increase since 2016. It's worth noting that we're particularly excited about the potential impact of the Phase 2 of our Atlanta College and Career Academy and how this could impact this particular metric, because we'll be opening up several new pathway opportunities for kids across the district when that opens in the fall. As measured by CCRPI, since school year 15, the number of APS CTA graduates earning an industry credential has also increased from 179 to 301, representing an increase of 68%. The school year 19 data have not yet been released by the state. Additionally, students at the Atlanta College and Career Academy are making progress in earning a technical certificate of completion, with 19 students earning a TCC in 2019. With that data review in mind, I'll now provide you with an update on our key accomplishments and areas of focus within each of our 6 strategic initiatives. We'll start first with positive behavior strategies, which include our focus on social and emotional learning, wraparound supports, and student attendance. Starting first with SEL, you can see that we have a lot to celebrate with our 18-19 accomplishments. Last year, under the brilliant leadership of SEL Director Rose Prejean-Harris, we continue to focus on extensive SEL trainings for adults, including the very popular Restorative Practices modules. And for the 4th year in a row, we received the District No Place for Hate designation. Our SEL team collaborated with Safety and Security team to roll out the Sandy Hook Promise threat and risk assessment protocols, and we were selected to Move This World organization as one of 14 most innovative SEL districts. This year, we're continuing to focus on increasing the student and adult exposure to practices that improve wellness, mindfulness, and restorative practices through the setup of school centers that focus on training and implementation. We're very pleased to be the host city for the Castle Cross District Initiative Conference in March of 2020. Our student services team, which you know was previously led by Tammy Workman, now under the dynamic leadership of Dr. Katika Lovett, deepened their focus on wraparound supports and led the district's efforts to address human trafficking in the Atlanta area, where we were excited to receive a $250,000 grant from Fulton County government, which will aid schools in their efforts to improve culture, climate, and attendance. They also worked hard to increase access to wraparound services with amazing partners such as Mercy Care, Atlanta Assistance League, Proposity, Vision to Learn, On-Site Vision, CHOA, and Emory University. This year, our partnership with Chris 180 will expand to additional schools. Part of this expansion includes trauma-informed care training for staff so that they can learn the signs of trauma, how to respond when a student is experiencing trauma, and ways to help students through this process. They're also providing therapeutic and community outreach staff at several schools and building on our partnership opportunities in their work at Promise Center in Zone 1. To ensure that students have the necessary supports to be successful in school, each school will continue to partner with an approved health service provider. There are currently 7 mental health partners that serve students throughout the district. APS's partner Mercy Care was the recent recipient of a grant that will allow an outreach and enrollment specialist to work across the district to sign up students for health care who don't currently have access to health care or their health care may have lapsed. Our student services team continues to focus on attendance, which has flatlined last year after seeing some declines. During the month of September, our Attendance Awareness Month, APS rolled out the Every Student Every Day Task Force in an effort to improve attendance and eradicate chronic absenteeism across the district. This task force will not only aid the district in reviewing and revising current attendance measures, it seeks to reduce chronic absenteeism by identifying needs and supporting the whole child to remove barriers to attendance. I'll now turn to our second strategic initiative, early learning. Today, there are 64 Georgia Pre-K classes within APS. It's also Georgia Pre-K Week. Our Office of Early Learning manages 55 of them spread across 34 schools, with the other classes being managed by our partner and charter schools. We have sought to allocate pre-K classes based on academic and financial need, school interests, anticipated ability to fill slots, and other considerations such as ELL population or potential to serve as a special education inclusion site. Over the last few years, we've worked extensively to increase the number of pre-K seats available to families across the city. As we've added classes, we've had to aggressively recruit students so that we can continue to request additional seats from the state. And I'm pleased to report that we have a current enrollment rate of 99%, which is pretty incredible. We know this is attributable to intensive recruitment and engagement efforts by the Office of Early Learning under the very capable leadership of Sydney Ahern and the Early Education Ambassadors, which is a partnership with GEARS, as well as enhanced outreach done by many of our schools. We are proud of the work we did last year, which was focused on continuing to strengthen our program internally through professional learning, deepen partnerships, and strong community engagement and recruitment. This slide highlights some of this work. We're also proud to be a key partner with PACT. The PACT, which stands for Promise All Atlanta Children Thrive, emerged from the Atlanta Early Education Leadership Council and sets the vision and strategy for early learning across the city. The key recommendations in the report serve as a guide for our work in early learning, and we hope to continue to see the city stakeholders coalesce around these initiatives. We have already begun to make progress against several of these recommendations, and we look forward to continued progress with the leadership and support of our partners with GEARS. This slide highlights some of the key areas we'll focus on during the 1920 school year. Of course, we'll continue to keep our focus on internal quality this year, as we believe that needs to remain a consistent priority. We'll also work to launch several new initiatives such as DLI and Unified Enrollment for Pre-K with the YMCA, while also supporting the PAC recommendations and overall vision. Turning now to our third strategic initiative, the implementation of the Georgia Standards of Excellence. As you can see, our teaching and learning team, under the very talented leadership of Dr. Olivine Roberts, worked intensely to develop a comprehensive pre-K to 12 literacy plan. This plan includes our beliefs about effective literacy instruction and the recommended practices and instructional strategies that create the conditions for robust and rigorous literacy instruction. We also continue this work in partnership with Chick-fil-A and the College Football Hall of Fame by continuing to offer Orton Gillingham training to new teachers, while also providing ongoing training to highly motivated teachers ready to acquire advanced knowledge and skills and practice in-depth application. We designed a new summer enrichment program called Level Up, which grants students access to high school math courses while in middle school, and continue to support the implementation of the blended learning model in Algebra 1 and Geometry. To support the implementation of data-driven instruction at the request of our schools, our team worked hard to enhance the units of study to include clear and specific learning targets and aligned assessments to support ongoing formative assessment. As we move into our new school year, our curriculum and instruction team, under the excellent leadership of Kelly Day, will continue to focus on ready readers by grade 3. This year's work includes the strategic implementation of the pre-K-12 literacy plan, continued training for K-5 teachers on the Orton Gillingham approach, and increased collaboration with early learning to articulate a clear pre-K-3 alignment strategy. We'll also continue our focus on leveraging students' social and emotional competencies to deepen their engagement with core content curriculum. Turning now to our fourth strategic initiative, Signature Programming, an initiative that is led by our new director of CTE, DeJuan Freeman. As you all know, as part of our implementation of cluster plans, that are aligned to our charter system model, APS clusters selected signature programs that include college and career readiness, international baccalaureate known as IB, and STEM. While each of our signature programs have some unique characteristics, there are common threads in each program that focus on academic rigor, SEL, college and career readiness, and ultimately preparing APS students to compete in a global and technological society. Like IB, the college and career and STEM education have specific approaches to learning and frameworks which offer students a rigorous educational experience. Although the approaches to implementation of the three programs are different, each signature program is focused on preparing and exposing students to 21st century learning skills and industry trends that address the demands of post-secondary institutions and the workforce. As you know, the implementation of these signature programs takes time and focus. We've worked with our schools on individualized implementation schedules that recognize their unique needs and other important priorities. For college and career readiness, each school's implementation status is determined by the standards of service that were created by APS, and they align with the implementation guidelines for the P21 framework for 21st century learning. We're very pleased with the progress we're making with IB. We now have 21 authorized IB programs and 16 IB candidate programs, with 7 of the 16 on track for applying for IB authorization this school year and 1 awaiting their determination status. Our STEM schools are also making strong progress. This past year, we celebrated Cleveland Avenue Elementary School and Coretta Scott King Young Women's Leadership Academy as they earned their STEM certification from Advanced Ed. And M. Agnes Jones, as you know, added the A to become a STEAM certified school by the Georgia Department of Education. This progress would not be possible without a significant investment in professional learning for all the signature programs this past year. Thanks to your continued funding of signature programs in our budget, we were able to support this important training while also ensuring that schools are able to fund equipment and resources and staffing needs to meet the signature program requirements. This year, we'll continue to focus on building the capacity of school leaders through PLCs and site visits. We'll also focus our efforts to secure business and community support while educating our broader community on signature programs. The team will continue to support our schools as they prepare for certification or evaluation visits. Now let's turn our attention to the fifth strategic initiative, which is the essence of our mission, college and career readiness, also under the leadership of DeJuan Freeman. As previously mentioned, for the second year in a row, APS implemented SAT Day in the spring of 2019, allowing all juniors to take the SAT exam at their home school, which removed funding and transportation barriers for many students. APS also witnessed an increase in the number of students taking an AP exam. 42 APS CTA students advanced and competed at a national international career technical student organization competitive events, which was an increase of 24 students from 2018. Collectively, the district's work-based learning students earned $494,000 in wages. Work-based learning provides their students the opportunity to earn while they learn in a structured professional workplace environment. This year, we'll continue to focus on increasing the number of pathway completers and students who earn an industry-recognizable credential. A significant focus of this team this year will be the launch of Phase 2 of our Atlanta College and Career Academy, which will include ensuring the equipment and supplies are in place for the new facility, recruitment of staff, and recruitment and scheduling of students. Our principal, Dr. Wilson, is working closely with our CTA team on this collaborative effort. Before moving on from these two strategic initiatives, which are signature programs in college and career readiness, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the person who led this work for the past several years, Dr. Michael Mays. As you all know, we lost this amazing educator this year, and it goes without saying this district would not be nearly as far along in these two initiatives if it were not for his dedicated service. Having said that, I'll turn to our sixth strategic initiative, which focuses on the turnaround efforts of some of our lowest performing schools. As I shared with you in February 2019, our school turnaround strategy has evolved quite a bit over the past few years. Based upon the improvement in data for the 2019-20 school year, for the 2019-2020 school year, we graduated 4 schools out of the intensive tier, who will fall into the all-school tier, and we also transitioned 6 schools from targeted tier to the intensive tier. With the various changes in state designations, we are now aligning our criteria for targeted level support to capture any school that falls within the Governor's Office of Student Achievement turnaround eligible schools list. As a reminder, the schools in the target level comprise the bottom 5% of Georgia schools when ranked according to the 3-year CCRPI average. Schools that receive intensive level supports fall into 2 categories. First, there are those schools that once received target level supports that have demonstrated gains that no longer put them in jeopardy of falling in the bottom 5%. The other category is designed to catch schools that show signs that they may be in jeopardy of falling into the bottom 5% of schools. Therefore, we're leveraging the state's new Promise School criteria to identify schools that fall between 5 to 10% of schools when ranked according to the 3-year CCRPI average. Under the gifted leadership of Sherry Force, our school turnaround strategy continues to be focused on investments in targeted and intensive level schools, with partners playing a critical role in supporting our turnaround efforts. Our targeted tier schools receive allocations for reading and math specialists, curricular resources, extended learning opportunities, and wraparound support. Schools who are designated for intensive level support receive funds to support additional wraparound personnel, in addition to the professional learning support targeted in turnaround schools. As we've shared before, after 3 full years of implementation, all 17 APS schools that received targeted or partnership support as part of the initial cohort of the APS turnaround strategy have improved their milestones proficiency rates since 2016. 3 schools showed double-digit increases in the percentage of students scoring proficient or above. This year, we'll continue to support the strategic alignment of the turnaround supports to ensure a more seamless integration of turnaround efforts with the overall school priorities. We'll also continue to evaluate how we phase in and phase out schools for the support based upon the latest data. I'll wrap up this afternoon by sharing how we support our schools with all of these efforts. In support of our 6 strategic initiatives, this year's schools and academics focus continues to be on strengthening our academic systems. Our 1920 goal continues to be rooted in the premise that transformation happens with school teams, not individuals, which is why we're continuing our series of trainings that bring members of leadership teams together to experience the learning and plan together. Our focus with these school teams is on ensuring that our academic systems are cohesive and work in concert to accelerate teacher efficacy and student growth. Our school teams have expressed great appreciation for the continuity of focus, which is why we've chosen to go deeper this year with 2 levers of the academic system framework this year, specifically honing in on data-driven instruction and instructional planning. This work is in alignment with our continued focus on calibrating around a shared understanding of what excellent teaching and leadership truly are. Our district-level strategic support is also aligned to the school-level annual improvement planning process, which happens in a continuous cycle. This year, we asked each school to ensure that their academic system plans were aligned to their specific priorities. And our priorities around strategic support build upon the strong foundation that has been laid over a 5-year journey. Of course, all this progress I've talked about today would not be possible without the hard work and commitment of a very strong schools and academics team. I've recognized a lot of these leaders throughout the presentation today, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the folks who help to ensure that all this gets to the ground in our schools. That's our amazing, effective, intelligent, charming, beautiful, and handsome associate superintendents who are sitting down the front row: Danielle Battle, Yolanda Brown, Emily Massey, Tommy Usher, and Dan Sims. Yeah, let's get Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jernigan. Although I feel like all your presentations
presentations go in that pace. Questions from the board? Leslie, Michelle, Ishay.
Thank you very much for all of that. I think I'd given some feedback earlier that it feels like kind of too much. I know that you're hitting sort of on everything, and it feels like in the academic pillar. And I would appreciate, I think, in the future that we maybe break this up a little bit and do a little more concentration either by cluster or school level, just to get an understanding of what, what are the specific levers that feel important in different areas, because I know you until that happens. The targeted level of supports will continue until they literally work themselves out of that, or what is the thinking around that?
Yeah, the current structure is that we align the targeted level support to the list that GOSA produces at the bottom 5% based upon 3-year CCRPI averages. Mm-hmm. It is obviously our hope that we don't have any schools in that state list. By definition, there will always be 5% of schools in the state on that list. Hopefully APS won't have any, but we are putting intensive supports in place for those schools. I think there should be a discussion as part of the new strategic planning process. What do the turnaround investments look like in the next phase of this? We have sort of evolved, and I've been keeping you guys updated every year how we've evolved the strategy each year. We've tried to be responsive to schools, what feedback they're giving us along the way, and make sure that we're tailoring it to address their needs. Mm-hmm. I think that the schools who receive the support really feel like now they have some voice in it, and they really appreciate the investment of resources and support for them.
Yeah, but I guess my question is, they're cognizant that there may be a taper off of that support.
We've had multiple examples now as schools have improved. We've phased out the dollars in their investment. So we have schools that moved from targeted to intensive, and we had a few schools that we took out of intensive are now in the all schools. So it's the reward for doing better as you no longer get the money.
Anti-incentive. That's all I have right now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a very high-level presentation, and so I do have some kind of maybe questions that might need detailed follow-up, just to be fair. I want to talk real quickly about follow up with Leslie talking about the academic framework first. Do teachers still have time, on their own during the week, to have their planning, or is their planning time being given at the grade level? Are they sitting together every day? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, I know it can vary by school, but just so that teachers don't have to take stuff home. I mean, we know they take stuff home, but so much more stuff home, so to speak.
Yeah, each school has been given the flexibility to navigate this based upon the unique context of their school. Obviously, the elementary school space is where it is hardest. At the secondary level, generally you can figure out a way to get a 90-minute planning period in for all your teachers every day, and they use sometimes 2 or 3 of those days for common planning time with the team. And then the remaining days are planning time for their individual needs. At the elementary space, depending upon how many special teachers you have and the rotation schedules you're able to work out, determines how much time you can take. We ask our schools at a minimum to do 90 minutes across the week of common planning time, because we think it's so important that the teachers are there together as a community, planning together, looking at data together, looking at student work together. That's the best practice that we really encourage our schools to try to figure out how to do in their schedules, and we support them in trying to work through their schedules to figure out how they can make that happen. I think we've had some schools that struggle with that, and certainly teachers value that individual planning time, so it's a paradigm shift if they're used to just going to their classroom, shutting their door, and doing their individual planning. Obviously, it pushes them out of their comfort zone a little bit, but once they've done it and they see the value of it, I think most teachers get on board with it. But of course, you will always have some that don't love that some of what they perceive to be their planning time is taken away for group planning time.
So, and let me ask you this as just a follow-up to all of that, and I really appreciate the detail. When do clusters get together and the 5th grade teachers talk to the 6th grade teachers, and when does that happen too for 8th grade and 9th grade, so that we're bridging kind of that vertical conversation as kids transition to each level of education, if you will?
Yeah, those are much more difficult to coordinate because you have to figure out when your 8th grade teachers are available at the same time as your 9th grade teachers, which generally doesn't happen during a regular school day. So it typically would only happen during a professional learning day when the two schools can sort of coordinate and bring people together.
And they do have that. They do have those days.
Out of the 10 professional learning days, 9 of those are school-based learning days, so they can figure out how to use that time.
Okay, thank you. All right, bear with me. On slide 36, I want to just make sure that we highlight that Carver, our partner Carver, is really headed more in a STEM project-based learning bucket. And I also know that in the appendix where it talks about Carver, it just has the Sylvan feeder schools. So I just want to make sure that we're making sure that our partners are included, and if we do need to differentiate that they're doing those 2 different programs that we noted as such. And then that's just FYI.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to talk to you a little bit, and you can tell me, Michelle, you're going to email me all this stuff, and I'm good with that. But I want to talk to you about all the OG stuff and the literacy. I appreciate the fact it sounds like we're using STAR in all 64 classrooms for pre-K to assess the kids for the school readiness, and I think that's great. But my understanding from when we were in strategic planning is that all schools are not necessarily using STAR K-3 to assess reading, and so we have some different ways that we're assessing in different schools. What are our thoughts on that moving forward? If we're looking, I noticed in our budget presentation, if we're looking at 3rd grade reading more of a priority, which I'm very excited to hear about, how are we going to look at creating an assessment tool or whatever that tool is going to be, where we're tracking all kids pre-K, and then K, 1, 2, and then 3, so that they're successful in the milestones?
It's a very timely question. So this year we actually rolled out a new formative reading assessment called Fountas of Pinnell, which is the sort of gold star of reading assessments.
So my understanding, though, is that that's a choice program.
It's not.
It's not.
No, it's
Okay.
district-wide.
Okay.
We do have 1 or 2 exceptions because they have a different tool that they've been using, but I would say 95% of our schools are using Fountas of Pinnell or something that's comparable to it. All schools are using something that's comparable.
Okay.
But with Fountas of Pinnell, you administer it multiple times throughout the school year, and it's done by the teacher who will do, it's not just a computer-based assessment, which is what STAR would be. You're actually doing the running record, so you're really able to diagnose as the teacher where the sources of confusion are, where kids need additional support with decoding skills, et cetera, and you can apply the prescription, so to speak, to whatever the challenges the kid may be experiencing. And so Fountas of Pinnell comes with a whole training series, as well as a data tracking platform to help our teachers. We're just implementing this. It's a heavy lift for teachers because they have to do one-on-one with every child when they administer the assessment. In addition to that, STAR, and I'm not sure who mentioned that STAR is not done district-wide. That is also a district-wide assessment. We have STAR data on every student in the district, K through 3, and pre-K through 3 actually. We're able to track their progress over time.
Okay, that's good to know. So go with that.
Yeah, can I just clarify one thing I do think is important to point out? When you're talking about within the context of public reporting, I think it's important to distinguish summative assessments versus formative. The formative assessments that we're doing at Fountas of Pinnell are really meant to be teacher-driven assessments that are meant to inform instruction. They're not necessarily used for external reporting purposes.
Yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I like this idea that it's very kind of individually child-focused. I just want to make sure that the fidelity is all there, because we need to make some, that's where we need a lot of help, is to make sure that people
huge investment in this year.
Are reading. And just to follow up on that, is there a place where I can find where the comprehensive K through 12 literacy plan is? Do we have like that framework published anywhere of what we're looking at?
I think it's on our website, but I'll have to follow up.
Okay, if you don't mind. And then going back to the OG training, and with the foundations piece, I take it that work's being bridged. And what else are we doing besides the 1 week in the summer with the OG training? It seems like we've taken on more as a district, and not necessarily just in schools that have foundations that can take on more. Can you walk me through a little
so
bit
the
of that?
OG training, and I think we talked a little bit about this during the professional learning training. Let me go back for a second, because
Yes.
I'm realizing as I'm talking on the Fountas of Pinnell rollout, when we phased in the Fontes Pinnell, we actually phased out the STAR, so I need to clarify that. We used to do STAR district-wide. This is the first year with the implementation of Fontes Pinnell, which is a much more intensive tool. Our teachers were giving us feedback that was going to be way too much testing, so we did phase that out. So sorry, I meant to clarify that.
You're good.
And the literacy plan is on our teaching and learning website. Okay, clarified that for you. Back to your question at hand on OG. The OG training, at this point we have trained all the teachers K-5 in the Title I schools, and then many of our other schools are training through their foundation supports and other things. We use Title I funds and grant funds to pay for the OG training initially. The primary strategy at this point is most of the teachers, and we've trained new teachers as they've come on board, and we will continue to do that through Title I dollars to ensure that everyone has kind of the baseline training. As I've mentioned before, it's a Tier 2 support. So it's really meant to support the students who have some decoding deficiencies or fluency deficiencies. The strategy at this point is to go deeper with those teachers who really have an interest in getting deeper expertise in OG training. So that's where we've invested in those teacher leaders who want to become kind of the reading experts in their building to help support other teachers in the school with the deeper implementation of that.
Right. Thank you very much, and I appreciate you being patient with me.
Yes, ma'am. And that's, by the way, with the Skink School, I think I may have mentioned before.
Ishay?
Thank you, David. Great presentation.
Thanks.
Let me see. Two of my questions were already answered. I'll just, one was in regards to the academic system plans, frameworks of the schools. One was just kind of diving more into like the collaboration piece, what does that look like district-wide for clusters, that are onboarding IB with clusters that have been doing historically, or even like the college and career readiness piece. That's the first question. And then the second question is in regards to the turnaround. I think that was slide 56, I think so. No, probably not. With the inverse. Sorry, I don't even want, I'll get it.
I'll get there. It's 48. Yeah, right there.
Yes. And so just trying to understand how many schools, based on this, how many schools do we still have that's considered turnaround eligible based on, DOE?
Yes, so we have 8 schools in that bottom tier. Now, of course, I should remind you that CCRPI will be coming out in a few weeks, and so that list will change again based upon the latest data. So it's 8 schools that are currently in the targeted level support. I believe we took some liberties with Harper Archer because of a merger that was happening. I know Fane was considered turnaround eligible, and I don't think Towns was, so we assumed that school would need some continued investment. I don't think it had a distinction. I'll have to check to see how they handled that merger. I'm not exactly sure. But essentially, those are the 8 schools that are considered by the state to be turnaround eligible. Okay. Similar with John Lewis Invictus, where Harper Archer had data, but John Lewis had not had 3 years of data to be considered turnaround eligible. So we took some liberties with those schools that were merging. Okay. And I'm not sure I followed. Can you repeat your first question about the collaboration?
The first question was just kind of talking through if there are any collaborative efforts that are happening between clusters, especially in regards to signature programming, where you have, of course, clusters that are just now onboarding IB or STEM or, even college and career, with some clusters that may be a little bit more advanced. Just want to see what are those efforts like.
Yeah, that's where our coordinators, the STEM coordinators and the IB coordinators, play a critical role in bringing people together from across schools. So most of our schools have a point person at the school level that is responsible for STEM or responsible for IB or the signature program that is in their school. And they come together frequently to get training, to get support, and to support the collaboration between schools. It can vary from cluster to cluster how they actually get that to the ground, but there's a great deal of support from central office and the sort of support of collaboration across schools. And they have monthly PL meetings, I should say, also with the coordinator to help support their own development. Those are the school-based coordinators.
Erica, then Cynthia.
I have a couple of questions. I want to go back to the OG implementation for reading. Would this be something that you will offer during the summer for students that needed additional help?
It's the OG implementation has been for teachers, so it's the training for the teachers to support
teachers, but it's a curriculum that they use to teach. the students, right? The methodology.
Yeah, it's a methodology that's used to teach students, but it's really for the Tier 2 supports that happen in the classroom during the regular school year. Now, we do have a Power Up program, and kids that need additional reading supports can come and often will come to the reading, to get reading support during the summer, but there's not a specific OG summer program.
Okay. All right. So let me go to these couple of questions I have about trauma-informed. Is this the first year that we're focusing on trauma-informed schools? Or is it something that kind of have been implemented in stages and now we're really just pushing that initiative? And then how many schools is it district-wide? What are the type of supports and partnerships that are involved with the trauma-informed schools, and what does the support looks like in partnerships?
Yes, so the trauma-informed training is something we have been doing for some time. I would say we're going deeper with it now. We have some partners that are really experts in that space. So Chris 180 is a partner that has really been helping us across the district. They're now in several of our schools. I don't have the exact number of schools that they're in, but each of our schools also have mental health providers. So we have 7 different providers across the district. And those partners also help us and help the staff with some of those needs around trauma-informed care. It's been sort of an evolving strategy within our student services team.
Okay. Right there. Okay, I had a question about the data that I saw regarding the AP, the number of the gap. Why is it so large? The number of students that are taking the test and then the number of students that are passing the test. Could you explain to me what type of challenges that they're having, or all the students that are taking the classes, are they registering to take the test? I mean, can you kind of explain what's happening with that that data that I'm seeing on slide 10?
Yeah, so you see a dramatic uptick in the number of kids taking the test starting in 2017. That's the year that we started paying for the AP test. Prior to that, kids would have to come up with the resources to pay for it. We might pay for one test, but generally kids would have to come up with the resources to pay for it. Obviously, when we started opening it up to all kids, most students who are enrolled in the class take the test, and we encourage them to take the test at this point. There's a long-standing debate about AP access and whether you should have a very rigorous process to let kids into the course. The research suggests that just exposure to that more rigorous curriculum helps kids when they go to college, even if they don't pass the AP exam. That exposure for a year to college-level coursework increases their chances of completing college. And so we have encouraged our schools that take a second look at kids that maybe historically you wouldn't have let into an AP course. This is all in the spirit of equity. Give them access to that course. And then, of course, we have our work cut out for us to continue to improve the quality of instruction and preparation so that when they sit for the AP exam, they are more successful. We're seeing slight improvement every year, and we're proud of that, but there's a lot more work to be done in that space.
Okay, thank you.
Cynthia?
First of all, I want to thank you for that comment about exposing students to advanced and rigorous learning, helping them in their future educational careers. I think that's also true of IB.
Sure, absolutely.
And any time we can expose students to highly rigorous education, it helps them in the next steps in their lives. So
That's right.
Thank you for pointing that out. I want to go back to slide 24, which is about attendance.
Yes, ma'am.
Back there, I just want to check because it says here that an ADA rate, ADA I assume is average daily attendance?
Yes, ma'am.
Means the average student missed 1 out of every 10 days in the school year, which on a 92.9% means that the average student misses what, about 12 days during the course of the year, 12 or 13 days?
I would have to get my calculator out to do the math.
Um,
It is high.
Particularly if that's average, which means that half the students miss more than that.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the every student, every day attendance initiative, how that works, and
Yeah.
how we're making that attractive specifically to students and parents.
Yeah, so the, and I just did a quick math. It is roughly about 13 days. The average kid is missing if you're at a roughly 93% attendance rate, which is why this has been and continues to be a real focus of ours. And obviously, it looks very different from school to school. You can have some schools that are in the high 70s, and we have some high schools, especially at the secondary level, where attendance is a real challenge. And we have put, intensive supports in place. We have a school that literally does a wake-up call every morning for all families to try to get all the kids to school. And I was shocked at the families, weren't upset about that, but surprisingly, her attendance rates have significantly improved in just a year with that intervention.
Now that's thinking creative.
That is thinking creatively. And so we have principals who are willing to, and they are doing all kinds of things to put incentives in place for kids to come to school. But the month of September, where we really focus on the rollout of this new initiative, the Every Student, Every Day, it's really around supporting our schools and understanding attendance protocols, putting practices in place where you're intervening quicker. So, for example, we know that if a kid last year missed more than 10 days, it's a very strong candidate to be a kid who's going to miss 10 days this year. So we're really trying to train our staff on getting ahead of some of those issues. And making sure that they are and they have an attendance team in place and just structures in place, those enabling systems that allow the school staff to get ahead of attendance issues and to proactively work with families where we've seen, chronic absenteeism occur. It's an ongoing battle, and obviously our schools are trying every day to work with families to support them where they may have attendance challenges, but we haven't obviously cracked the nut on it yet.
Do we have any broad themes or trends as to why attendance is an issue? And obviously that's going to vary, as you said, from school to school and cluster to cluster. But I'm wondering if, for instance, we are collecting any data on how attendance rates correlate to now providing free breakfast for every child.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that's something that's helping. Is it transportation? Is it transiency? Do we have any broad brush? I mean, you know what I'm trying to ask here.
Yeah, and it's a great question. I'm not sure that we have identified one single issue. I do think it varies from family to family, from child to child, from community to community. I think some of the things you mentioned, I think, are areas where we've tried to put supports in place. I think starting the school year later this year, we're hoping that will help a little bit with the attendance rates, because we definitely know our attendance in the first week or two of school was down. I think it's important to keep in mind that these attendance rates for the secondary level are taken at the period level, at the class level. So you could have kids who are showing up late to school every day and missing their first period block. That gets captured in the attendance as well. So some of this is also a function of kids being tardy and getting to school late, which could be transportation challenges. There could be lots of root causes for why we have kids that are not coming to school. But ultimately, the attendance team's job is to really try to get underneath it at the school level and really get underneath it at the individual student and family level to figure out what the root causes may be and to try to offer supports to the extent that they can.
Okay, so let me go back then. This percentage on this slide, this is because we used to count high school attendance by period.
We
and
still
so,
do. Mm-hmm.
and so a student's progress report or report card would come home and they'd have missed one day plus 3 periods.
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting those with my kids. Are you saying that a student who misses first period every Monday morning is counted in here as having missed a whole day? Because I thought they had to be out until a certain point in the day.
For secondary schools where they have class level attendance, unlike elementary, we were taking it for the day in a homeroom.
Right.
We are taking attendance by the class period. And so that all gets factored into the average daily attendance rate. If they miss, so to answer your question, if they miss the first period every day across a week, I can confirm with our team, but I'm pretty certain that would be the equivalent of missing a day of school.
Yeah, but it would not be the equivalent of missing 5 days.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Don't have anything further. Thank you.
Isha?
Excuse me. Yes. So the literacy plan that you're referring to is not on the link.
Okay.
Just wanted to
We'll
take
get that
note.
put up there.
And the reason why I was wanting to just look at and ask is just also having, since we're talking about academic programming, is just kind of understanding the literacy plan or supports that are happening in between middle school and high school. So I know we've talked about like this the third grade reading piece, but also through the strategic plan and conversation was a revelation as far as our 8th graders as well. And so just trying to understand like what that support, you know, and it could be a quick rundown or something afterwards, just seeing what that looks like. One thing I often hear from the from high school pieces is like, you know, that rush to close the gap for 9th graders, just based on that transition. So just want a little more dialogue to be able to talk about that more with the community.
Yeah, and so middle schools and high schools obviously do a variety of creative things to address kids who may come in with reading deficiencies. A lot of times you'll see them block a kid into a double block where they're getting some additional reading support, like a reading support class. You may see there's a lot of use, particularly at the high school level, with blended learning and some online tools that really are targeted at helping kids with their reading deficiencies and really kind of drilling down to where the gaps are. But our reading, the sort of pre-K-12 literacy plan is really focused on that core instruction, because if we're spending our time remediating 2/3 of our kids who aren't at the reading level, there's something wrong with the Tier 1 instruction. And so that's what our focus has really been on, getting it right at the Tier 1 level and making sure that the quality of instruction that's happening the first time around is of the quality where we don't have to do all of this sort of additional remediation efforts.
Are we seeing more of those remediation efforts in high school or in middle school? So since we are investing at the Tier 1 piece and kind of moving up, are we identifying and implementing earlier rather than trying to catch up?
If we can, quick questions, and if not, let's follow up, just because we have 2 more presentations left and it's almost 4 o'clock.
Understand. To the point about the literacy website, if there's a way like to put school specific, like what schools have what programs at some point, that would be lovely. So last one is just, again, make sure I heard correctly. AP and IB courses at the high school level, obviously the diploma program, are offered, access is offered to everyone. There's no, you have to do X, Y, or Z to, if you want to enter the diploma program at any of the high schools, are they able to do that? Is any child able to take an AP class or an IB?
There's still some process for getting into the class. So I didn't mean to imply that any kid could just enroll in the class. That wouldn't be, and there are schools that take an AP for all kind of strategy or an IB for all strategy. That isn't something that's happening in all of our schools.
Okay.
What the encouragement, what I meant to communicate was that the encouragement is to increase access and to encourage more kids to enroll.
But again, of things to know about different schools, that might be important for families to understand as well. So, okay, thank you.
David, dual enrollment, do we have any programs in our schools where the professors, where it's seamlessly in our schools versus students having to travel to Georgia State or Atlanta Metro?
We do have a few examples where professors from Atlanta Tech or Atlanta Metro will come to the campus to teach the course.
Okay. And are there any plans to increase that so that we can increase the dual enrollment participation numbers?
You know, we are taking a comprehensive look at all of the sort of access to rigorous courses because there is a tension between pushing a kid to dual enrollment versus AP versus IB. Some schools really focus on AP access over dual enrollment. Yep. Other schools sort of focus on dual enrollment. We have asked each school to develop a school-by-school plan to really look at the access to those rigorous courses and to figure out for their school what the strategy is going to be. We have right now 2 schools, Grady and Douglas, I believe, where they have professors who come in to teach the course. Right. That's certainly an option that we will continue to explore with our schools if that's the right fit for their school.
Okay. And then these are just more comments. With the wraparound supports, mental health providers and partners, I know we have Chris 180 partnered with Washington, Carver, and Douglas, or I think those were the...
I don't know all the schools offhand. They're in a number of our schools, though.
Well, Washington, Douglas, and Forest Hills Academy.
Yeah.
I know there's also need in other parts of the system, and I want to make sure that where we are with those 7 mental health partners, trying to make sure that we're taking a load off of a lot of our principals and teachers, and some of the clusters that may not be as in need of intensive support, like the Douglas and Washington clusters, but who also run across a lot of the issues that those clusters encounter. We've seen at our at-large listening sessions, South Atlanta in particular, Therrell, they often, they're part of the turnaround plan, but because those clusters are seemingly humming along and improving, our partners, foundations tend to not forget, but they focus on other places in the system, and I want to make sure that we're shining a light on what's going on in those clusters as well. And then the other thing I was going to do is shout out Sydney and her team for the recruiting efforts that they do. I see it on social media and really going door to door and talking and touching people and encouraging them to enroll their kids in pre-K goes towards that 99% number. That's not necessarily possible without that door-to-door business-to-business work that she and her team have put in. So shout out to her.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Angela King-Smith, would you please join us for an update on strategic plan?
Good afternoon. I'm excited to bring an update regarding our work and development of the strategic plan. I know my slides will catch up with me. Today, our goal is to review progress as well as provide an update regarding our meetings that we've had with the community, as well as a number of different groups across the district, as well as feedback from the board retreat. We are halfway through the strategic plan timeline, and we have completed our assessment phase, as well as lots of work to begin the development of the strategic plan. And we are going into the actual development of the strategic plan. Overall, we are on track with the strategic plan development timeline. During the assessment phase, we met with a number of different groups, and on the slide you'll see that we completed all of our community conversations. We completed our online survey, and we've gathered around 1,000 different survey responses. We collected responses at our back to school bash, as well as conducted a number of different conversations that have helped us to gather feedback regarding strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. All the data can be found at apsstrongschools.com. During the board retreat, we engaged in a conversation focused around the components of the strategic plan. We asked for feedback regarding the components of the strategic plan, and we got confirmation that we would utilize the existing mission, vision, guiding principles, as well as core values. The conversation at the board retreat focused around the items that are highlighted on the slide: building a theory of action that aligns with our vision for the future, priorities, strategic goals, strategic initiatives, as well as action steps. And so what we heard from you was that you agreed with the recommended components for the development of the strategic plan. We also heard and shared with you a proposed timeline regarding the administration's work for the detailed components of the strategic plan. We also got feedback that we would have the following items in place and developed for your review by December. That's the mission, vision, guiding principles, core values, theory of action, priorities, as well as strategic goals, along with some high-level indicators for the plan. And then in February, we would have identified the high-level work streams or finalize those high-level work streams. By March, the strategic initiatives for 2020-2021, the upcoming school year, would be defined to really make sure that we have the budget in place, and then we would outline and work on the details for each of the major strategic initiatives for the 5-year plan. We also engaged the community as well as the board as well as internal stakeholders around this idea of bringing our vision to life. And so we engaged in lots of conversations regarding the vision statement and how we could bring that to life, as well as what does success look like. And so highlighted on this slide, you see some of the feedback that we've gotten from the community. All of the comments, all of the notes, everything, again, is posted on the APS Strong Schools website for your review. And then highlighted here, what we heard during the board retreat, we asked you a question around the vision, the shared vision for our district, and to give us an idea of an image that comes to mind for us to share in terms of 2025, what you see in terms of the shared vision. And what we heard from you during the board retreat, some sample themes that we heard on those little sticky notes were things around systems and supports that are provided for schools, achievement gaps and equity are addressed, staff are supported and empowered, parents in the community are engaged, students are college and career ready, and a quality neighborhood school in every single neighborhood. Outlined on these slides are all of the cluster meetings. We took all of those notes and we started to identify the themes that we heard regarding strengths, regarding opportunities, as well as barriers and challenges. And you can see with each of those themes what we heard from each of the respective clusters, or where we heard it. Those are just some of the high-level themes. Again, all of the detailed notes can be found on the website. And then we engaged at the board retreat a conversation around key indicators for collective impact from Learn for Life, and we looked at the critical levers that they have looked at across the metro area to really impact education and to across a number of metro area school districts, looking at kindergarten proficiency, 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math proficiency, high school graduation rate, post-secondary enrollment, as well as post-secondary completion. And then during the board retreat, as a part of the exit ticket, we asked you, in order to achieve your mission and vision, where would we need to focus as a school system, our resources and attention? And what we heard from you were the following themes: empowering effective school leaders and staff, prioritizing and meeting the needs of students and schools, continuing to strengthen district as well as school culture, closing the achievement gap and addressing equity, and then focusing on early childhood and literacy. And then we also asked for clarity regarding the vision of excellence in terms of how you would like it to inform or play a role with the strategic plan. We laid out a couple of different options. One, guiding the development of the plan. 2, a theory of action for the district with some modifications. A theory of action as is that would be used as a part of our schools and academics team in the work at the school level. 4, a set of commitments that we could communicate and share with the community. And then 5, some version of a performance framework for district and schools. And what you told us was that you would like it to be used to inform the theory of action within the strategic plan, as well as the equity policy to help inform the theory of action within the strategic plan, and to think about how we could modify the vision of excellence to include a layer of district support to schools to achieve the vision, and then to build some initiative or measures that are connected to the proposed theory of action. And so that's what we heard as a part of the retreat. And then finally, our community feedback. What we heard, we went to the Go Team Summit. We've been talking with a number of employees across the district regarding the strategic plan and gathering all of that feedback. We will be engaging with Go Team members in the month of October, as well as a number of different committees across the district regarding the strategic plan and gathering some additional information. But we are taking all of the information that we've heard throughout all of these meetings, and we are going to begin the development and the drafting of the strategic plan. So at this time, that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, we would take them now. Cynthia?
On the table talks.
Yes.
And I love that idea, by the way.
Yes.
Can we also get employees to do the same thing? In other words, not just parents, and I want parents and probably more than one parent from every school. I assume these are small groups, and so that we could have several parents volunteer to do this.
Yes, that's the idea, is that we want parents to host these and that it's a circle of parents to be engaged in them. Because one of the concerns regarding the strategic planning meetings, even though we had great turnout, we had great turnout.
I was really impressed by the
Yes,
turnout.
we had great turnout at every single cluster. But allowing for those parents that may not come out, those are the people we're trying to reach. And that's kind of the goal of the Table Talk conversation. So we're in the process of recruiting parents to host those. They can host them at the school, they can host them at the media centers or local areas. And we're designing the process as we speak. And so the goal is at the end of October that those would take place. We're setting, and we're working, and we've asked both Go Team members, parent organizations to host these conversations, because the goal is parent to parent having, real conversation.
Please involve the PTAs and the cluster organizations in that.
That is our goal.
They are a rich source of parents who can provide some steady facilitating and some leadership in that area.
Yes.
But let me go back to my question. Can we also set up a way that we can do this with employees at particular schools? Get a teacher or a parapro or someone at every school to host similar conversations for employees, because they need to also be involved in this process.
Yes, and we have reached out to employees. We've had a number of different employee meetings happening around the district, and we're popping into those and asking some questions and getting some feedback from employees. We will take your question under advisement and see what we can do, kind of given the time frame. But we know we're going to be able to get to teachers and staff as a part of this work. It was just for parents who haven't had the chance to be able to connect. So we'll take that under advisement.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we provide some informal, small group setting opportunities for our employees, other than these large meetings and taking away from their professional development opportunities.
Agreed.
I think they ought to have the same kinds of small, informal, safe, open conversations that we want parents to have as well. And for that matter, students. But I think we're working on some ways to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Michelle.
It's real quick, Ms. Smith. On the community cluster conversations that we had, I do believe that the public had requested to understand what the breakdown of the attendees were. So moving forward, if that could just be in the appendix, I don't necessarily think it needs to be in the slide, but if it could just be noted somewhere, if we are tracking that.
We weren't tracking it at first, and then we started to ask the question to kind of get a sense of who was in the room. And so we kind of have an idea at each cluster, roughly, if it was more than half parents or half employees, we know which clusters those are, but we didn't actually, and then some people were there in dual roles, parents and, an employee too. Yeah.
Great. And I just wanted to say that this has been a really, as I always say, like, this has been a really good strategic planning process so far. So just let us know wherever you need.
Thanks. Thank you.
It's been great work.
All right, Lisa, the CFO, will bring it home with the monthly update, but this is also because we were not able to get the board scheduled given your calendar conflicts. The budget parameters conversation, we'll be having that conversation as part of this agenda item after you finish the monthly update.
Right. So good afternoon, board members. Dr. Karsarfin. Today I'll be presenting 4 topics related to finance. We'll maneuver our way through 3 fiscal years. First, I'll provide you with the unaudited revenue and expenditure update for the FY 2019 fiscal year. Next, I'll be presenting the financials for FY 2020 for all activities occurring in the months of July and August. Third, I'll be presenting to you a series of budget adjustments. And finally, we'll be discussing and teeing up for those budget parameter conversations for FY 2021. The next 4 slides provide an update of the unaudited consolidated general fund financials for fiscal year 2019. The first slide shows the revenue by category budget to actuals, including variance and percent of budget. The district collected 99.65% of budgeted revenue. Of note, state revenue was under-collected primarily due to a state holiday for state health payments. No expenditures were made for state health in that month either, so this is an offsetting impact to our overall financials. We collected $5.5 million more than budgeted in local revenue and did not use $3 million of fund balance earmarked for prior year expenditures. This slide continues our analysis of the FY 2019 revenue by comparing FY 19 actual revenue collections for FY 18. Overall resources increased by about 7.76% over the previous year, although there was a marked decline in the amount of funds received by the state. Again, this is in part due to the state health holiday, but also demonstrates the impact of increased local revenue and the overall district's financial revenue patterns. So the more generated through local revenue, the more that it will be offset by decreases in state funding. On slide 5, we see the expenditures to budget to actuals with remaining balance and percent of budget for FY 2019. The district spent 97.6% of budgeted expenditures. The transportation function was overspent, and accordingly, increases to the transportation department were included in the FY 2020 budget. This slide shows FY 19 unaudited actual expenditures for 19 against 18. The largest increases continue to be in school-based expenditures such as instruction, pupil services, and school administration, while general administration and maintenance operations experienced reductions in spending from the previous year by 3% and 1.15% respectively, even as salary and benefit increases drove overall costs up. Overall, the district was able to add nearly $14 million back to the fund balance, restoring the percent of fund balance to expenditures to 9.69%. That's up from 8%. For FY 20, this means a beginning fund balance that is 9.31% of expenditures. While the FY 20 budget plans to neither restore or use fund balance, if the payments negotiated within the TAD IGA settlement are satisfied, we would be able to bring nearly $23 million back to the district's reserves, bringing the total percent of fund balance to a much more comfortable 12% and better cushioning this district from future financial hardships, including delays in the tax digest or economic downturns. In FY 2019, the general fund balance topped out at $157.9 million, which was 24.2% of that year's budgeted expenditures. That amount exceeded the state-mandated cap on fund balance of 15%. However, it helped the district to weather the recession at that time. Since then, fund balance has hovered between 9 to 14% of expenditures, which is between the board's parameters of 7.5 and 15%. The diverging lines for FY 2020 show the 2 scenarios for ending fund balance for this year. The higher of the 2 indicates a fund balance if the IGA settlement agreements are honored, and the lower shows ending fund balance if they are not. Within the next 4 slides, we'll move on to the FY 2020 financials. Since we're so early in the fiscal year, there's not much information that we can currently derive from these reports. Through the months of July and August, we've collected 1.38% of the total resources budgeted. It's important to recall that local property taxes represent the majority of our operating budget, and we are only now starting to collect some of those payments. As a benchmark, we can see that collections at this time last year were 0.85%. On slide 11, we see the budget to actual expenditures so far for FY 2020. A seeming lag in instruction, pupil services, and staff services behind other functions is due primarily to the fact that most of our positions that are less than annual, so less than 254 days contracted, are within these functions, and those actually have salaries that accrue back for the month of August. Slide 12 represents the current spending trend for FY 20 against the FY 19 trend. While there are some fluctuations function by function, the overall spend is on pace with and slightly behind the previous year's spend. Please remember that timing of large expenditures from month to month can greatly impact the percentage spend against the previous year. I'm bringing 6 budget adjustments to you today. The vast majority of these are for state-funded grants. And so will be increases to both revenue and expenditure line items, with the exception of a $448,103 increase to expenditures for prior year carryovers for our schools. You'll recall, as a cushioning and stability method, we allow schools to carry over a certain percentage of their non-personnel dollars, and that's what this represents. Also included are a $25,000 increase for Brown Middle School CTAE state grant, $46,485 decrease to revenue and expenditures for CTAE extended day and CTAE supervision state grants, a $372,430 increase to revenue and expenditures for a math science supplement to a state grant, and a $490,833 increase to revenue and expenditures for buyback services for safety and security. Lastly, a $95,689 increase to revenue expenditures for a residential treatment center state grant. Additional details can be found in Agenda Item 9.01. Also in Agenda Item 12, I need to check the exact item, but we do have the special revenue adjustments less than $1 million for information. My final section moves into the future with a discussion of the FY 2021 budget parameters. As a reminder, the board sets annual budget parameters to guide budget development, including revenue assumptions, fund balance targets, and expenditure goals. Also, parameters identify process and presentation recommendations that provide transparency in linking goals and outcomes to district spending plans. And parameters serve as the monitoring procedures that hold the district accountable for executing the budget plan. Budget parameters should be in alignment with the mission, vision, strategic plan, and charter system operating model. Also, good parameters should focus on depth versus breadth by making deeper investments in specific parameters instead of distributing funds over too many disparate priorities. I won't spend too much time on the current draft of these parameters, as these will be discussed in much more detail at the next Budget Commission meeting on October 17th, but I wanted to provide you an update with an update on the 2021 process. While we are still super early in the budget development process, there are some known and potential impacts that will help us to set the stage as we develop the budget parameters. The district plans to continue contributing an additional 3% annually to the APS and city pension liability, which will add about $1.7 million to the FY 2021 budget. As of now, we anticipate no changes to the employee rates for state health, but we received a very pleasant surprise around TRS with a decrease in rates for the first time that I can remember, from 21.14% of salary to 19.06% of salary. While we do not anticipate hearing any news on teacher salaries anytime soon, we do know that the current governor did run on a platform of $5,000 teacher raises, and last year we saw a $3,000 increase, so that may mean another round of teacher raises this year from the state. School allotments represent another large expenditure category for this district. For FY 2021, we anticipate continued scaling of existing charter schools, offset primarily by reductions in the central office administrative supports. We will continue to increase funding for signature programs as schools mature through the more advanced stages of those programs, and will continue to invest in the turnaround strategy. While we do not anticipate any large shakeup in SSF funds, we will continue to increase weights tied to equity. As I mentioned, I won't spend too much time on these next couple of slides, as these outline the draft resource and expenditure parameters as carried over from last year. In general, the resource parameters provide guidance on millage rate, fund balance thresholds, provide a commitment to maximize the various funding sources, including grants and partnerships, in support of the overarching strategy of the district, freeing up funds where possible by eliminating ineffective programs and maximizing the resources available to the district through our tax base by protecting the district's boundaries or by limiting the impact of TADs and abatements. Slide 20 outlines the draft expenditure parameters, which are, as of now, holdovers from last year. These are the parameters that that have been provided to us as guidance and anchored the work as we have developed the past budgets. However, it is my recommendation that we utilize the next Budget Commission meeting to deeply engage in and identify what the budget priorities will be going forward. Based on the types of questions and categories of concerns that we've received over the past few weeks, I'm recommending that we discuss parameters with meaningful benchmarks and targets for the following categories. A parameter in response to per pupil expenditure targets, a parameter to provide specific guidance on charter and partner school allocation targets, a parameter to provide specific guidance for central office and general administration expenditures, specific fund balance targets, specific targets for the state's financial efficiency star rating, understanding that this is a metric that is based on a 3-year moving average, specific targets for maximizing our collectible tax digest. We have not had parameters around these areas in the past, and if these are categories by which our success for our budgeting process will be measured, then now is certainly the time to start developing those parameters. To that end, I encourage you to attend the October 17th Budget Commission meeting, and after that Budget Commission meeting, we'll be finalizing these parameters and bringing these back to the board at the November board meeting. The draft timeline includes many opportunities for public and community engagement, as well as many opportunities for the administration to engage with the board to build a budget that is representative of the needs, strategies, and goals of the district. This includes 8 Budget Commission meetings, 7 Budget and Finance Advisory Committee meetings, or BFAC meetings, 4 regional meetings across the various clusters, and 2 public hearings before the budget is finalized on June 1st, 2020. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Cynthia, Nancy, Michelle, Leslie.
On the list of suggestions that you made, I am very much in agreement with looking at those targets at our next Budget Commission meeting. I would like to request that we be provided with historical numbers on as many of those as possible for as far back as we can go. In particular, I'd really like to look at those numbers back into the last recession, because I think we need to get a handle on what it was we did other than just spend down $100 million worth of fund balance that helped us weather the recession, and figure that into our calculations going forward. So if we could get some just really rich, deep data going back a good long way on the measures, and I should have made notes, but I didn't. But you've got your notes, and just as far back, if we can really push those back more than just a couple of years, I think that would be really helpful to our discussion.
Sure. So we'll pull the data that's available to us in our current operating systems. I do know that it only goes back a certain amount of years, so we can go back as far as we've started keeping it in our current Lawson system. Also, what's available to us from the Georgia Department of Education's website, they do have an archive of data. So what's available we can pull from. There are going to be certain metrics that we've only started collecting over the past couple of years as new initiatives come on. So we won't have a lot of historical context for some of those. For example, the financial efficiency star rating.
The most obvious one is per pupil spending. There's going to be data going way back on that. But just as much of that as you would be able to pull, that would be really helpful for us. Thank you.
Nancy?
There's been a lot of discussion around the budget and, you know, how we're spending money and what our reserves are. And I didn't know if maybe this would be a good time to flush through some of these parameters while everybody's together here, so it's not done piecemeal.
Okay.
But I don't know, we can answer the rest of the questions and see if.
Yeah, I think if folks have questions, let's go ahead and get them out, and then if you also want to discuss the parameters, let's go ahead and do that. So let's questions first, then discussion on the parameters.
I'd actually had emailed back on the 21st of September. I think that's right, if I'm looking at the right thing. Actually, my email may have gone out a little bit after that because that was the notice. Let's see if I can see where my email is. But I did send an email that I've yet to get a response on. So I just want to bring that back up. I'll put it back out there again. But it's really just kind of trying to understand, what are we going to be doing to shift some of the money? And I think, again, all these things that you've just mentioned are really good first steps. They're kind of what the DENSA fall is, and again, it's all APS oriented as well. So I think these parameters that you've proposed are really good, or at least a good first step. Let me see if I can find that email.
Dr. Sarpin?
I just want to be sure, just clarity of process. So we're going to actually discuss the parameters. I just want to be clear that these are arguably exactly as they were for this current year. So keeping them this way does not answer many questions that have been raised. So it is important that we actually get more explicit than we ever have before. So I've heard different feedback about fund balance, and Cynthia Briscoe Brown, I sent detailed information about that because I don't think people have remembered what we've done over the last 5 years as it relates to fund balance and why we use fund balance in different ways, even so far as to there doesn't seem to be a lot of clarity about what happened in the tax digest and why we are at the percentage levels that we are. So, for example, we would be at, I think, almost 12 or 13% if we had the settlement agreements payment from the city, and we can't exceed 15% without penalty from the state. So there's been a lot of really good work that's been done, but I'm not sure it's clear for everyone on why we did what we did, or that people can remember all those details. I know we've had a lot of push and pull on the per pupil expenditure, to Cynthia's point about what does it look like and how that is tied to comparisons to other districts and what is inside our number that is not inside other districts' numbers. But to balance that with Board Member Mitchell, you've talked extensively about the South expenditures compared to other areas of the district, and if so, how much is enough? Because if we're doing per pupil and are trying to reduce our expenditures, or reduce our per pupil expenditures against our performance, which is what the state puts out in its rating. What's it called, Lisa?
It's the Financial Efficiency Star
The
Rating.
Efficiency Star Rating, which has been raised by a U Board member, Olympiadis, then it would mean, for example, we would not be able to add more money to the budget to spend because it would only make that rating decrease more while we're trying to lift the rest of the district. So there are details within that we would have to make decisions on. Like, are we going to address the efficiency rating? Are we cutting per pupil expenditures or reducing it in one area dramatically, but raising it in another area where we have concerns about equity? And then the whole collectible digest piece. Is it about living within the structure we have, or are we actually trying to grow our digest, which means we're pushing
on some of the incentives, abatements, and tax allocation district structures that we have. So, so I hear you on these look good, but given everything we've heard in the last few months, this does not reflect clearly, this is not going to answer some of the issues that have been raised, and we need to decide whether or not that's the appropriate direction. I know that we have a policy now on equity. That task force is just getting started. While those people are appointed by the board, I would also say they are learning about equity in Atlanta and in APS. And so there are things that we've even talked about today that would be critical for us if we wanted to do game-changing work in equity. One being, I think someone mentioned reading, making sure, I'm going all the way back to Stephen Lee days. Remember, we would have these conversations in the Budget Commission meeting, but like really about lifting literacy by the 3rd grade, or the data that we've seen on the achievement gap. We would need to explicitly say that as a target and put resources in it versus some of the other things that we've been doing. A huge part of turnaround strategy is about partnership schools. Is that something we want to continue to do? There's also policy guidance that might not run in alignment with some of these budget parameters if we change them. So I think that would be something that the policy committee would need to consider as well. So anyway, I just raised it because we really do need to settle some of the philosophical conversations we've been having and put those on the table, which would be different in our Budget Commission meetings compared to the past. So we would need other staff members to kind of come and talk about the programmatic pieces, and then Lisa can build what you want. But those, this would be the time for us to clean that up. But you know, we need time to do that, and we really, to the point around equity and expenditures in the South, I mean, this would be we've been doing some, but it's tied to turnaround, it's tied to SPLOST, it's tied to, other areas of our budget. But if we are really going to go deep and tackle the achievement gap, overlay race, overlay socioeconomics, we need to change these parameters dramatically and really be prepared for next school year.
Is this something that we need to decide now for the budget meeting on October 17th, or is it something that I could, like for me, I want to kind of work through this a little bit more and bring to you, Nancy, kind of what some of my recommendations would be for the 17th? Yeah, it is. Oh, I'm not sitting up to it. For October 17th?
Yeah, so of course you're not deciding anything tonight. You'll vote on the budget parameters later in the fall. Mm-hmm. But the point is that, the meeting we were supposed to be having for Budget Commission, everyone's schedule, board members had a hard time getting a quorum. So what we're trying to do is have some discussion tonight. Fair enough, you can't make all the decisions tonight, but yes, please come on the 17th prepared to talk about that. And I just don't want anybody to walk in there thinking, this is about a continuation of what we've been doing last year. If we want to clean up things about what's inside the per pupil expenditures, if we want to talk about achievement gaps, if we want to talk about addressing the deep intergenerational poverty that has us kind of challenged, and these parameters aren't going to cut it. We will need to do more. And literally research is coming out saying that the fastest way to close the achievement gap is not to have concentrated poverty. It never works. And we have schools, as y'all know, that are in neighborhoods that are deeply concentrated. So it might change the way that you do do our work if you're trying to get at the thing that actually has academics stuck, and using that research to inform what you might actually be able to do. And maybe, Lisa, we could send that as a pre-read, that research that just came out. That might really help elevate the conversation.
Leslie?
I had the easy one. I just wanted to say thank you very much. The graphic display of the information on 17 and 18, I think. Very nice format. I appreciate that. And any anticipation of the TAN, I'm not sure if that came up already, but.
So we're doing great. Our collections really started ticking up. We get our collections every Friday, and we saw our biggest checks really start rolling in last Friday. But we're definitely on pace to be able to do full repayment of the TAN as scheduled in December.
Isha?
I just have a couple of questions. One is in regards to slide 8 in regards to the fund balance piece, and just asking that as well to understand my colleagues on thoughts on this. Just because, being on this board for the last 6 years, we knew besides Michelle, Candace, and Erica, we knew there were going to be large investments that needed to be made with signature programming, turnaround, right-sizing things, all of that. So I think it was very clear that we would be committed to dipping into our fund balance versus the conversation. I think everybody remember the brutal conversations every year about, or do we increase the millage, right? So I just wanted to have some understanding on, making sure that there's not anything I'm missing, number one. Number two, for FY8, I see where the fund balance went beyond 15%. And then there's the note that says GFOA recommends the best practice to maintain 2 months worth of expenditures, or 16.7%. So it's kind of contradictory if we're going to be penalized for going over 15%, but it's listed as a best practice. Lisa, can your team tell us Lisa, tell us what the fund balance parameter, recommendation for your team, just tell us what's the recommendation is because you hear about, some districts being over, but they have larger districts. So $2 or $3 billion budget, and their percentage is going to yield more dollars. So just want some understanding on that.
So I'll answer your second one first, because that one is an easier one to target. So GFOA does have that best practice around the 2 months, and that's about 16%. It's been a conflict for most school districts in Georgia, where if you want to be one of those benchmark districts, then you know that you're going to have your hands slapped by the state. It is a finding. It's not one of the worst findings you can have, and many districts will take the hit and just say, you know what, we'd rather have that finding around having an excess of 15%. I will say, though, that every dollar that you put in the bank is a dollar you're not using to educate kids in that year, and is a dollar you're not returning to taxpayers. And in districts like this, where you have high property values and increasing property values, you're constantly balancing those decisions, right? So while I do encourage, and our team is working towards a target that is closer to that 12, 13, 14%, I personally, where we are in the deep investments we still need to make, and where we can return money to our homeowners, I would say we don't necessarily need to target above that 15%. If we could get into that 12 plus percentage range, it would definitely help us to start avoiding these TANs, where we could weather these short-term financial issues much easier. No district's going to be prepared for another recession if the bottom falls out, but it would help us to prepare if we did have a stronger fund balance. I wouldn't encourage that we target those 2008 levels. It's just not in the balancing act we're currently having. We should be investing in our annual expenses.
That makes good. That makes perfect sense. I hear you out. If we all just reflect on where we were at that time, that was one thing where people like salaries were frozen, schools weren't receiving, resources. There was consolidations, left and right. So, my second question is going to. So, thank you for that. My second question.
Answer your first question real quick. So I will say that. So you did have a question around where you were just kind of reminding us. We did have an exercise that the board did at the time in FY 2017, and it was the waterfall, right? So we actually did an exercise at a board retreat where we talked about the budget, and we talked about all of the priorities, and we had little note cards that had different transformational strategies or levers that we could pull, and we had funding streams, right? So we had, these are funding streams, the general fund funding stream, and this is what we would be willing to use local taxpayer dollars to fund, these high priority things. We had partnerships and grants, the funding stream. So these are the things that we would want to leverage our community. We would want to go seek additional funds for. It's important to us, but we think that we could have these funded elsewhere. We had a waterfall. We talked about those things that were not a priority at the time with all the different things that we were focused on. And we did say that there were some of those strategies that at that point in time were not a priority, and we were going to let go of the waterfall. And in that year, we did decide that restoring fund balance was not a priority. It was a year we were doing deep investments in our turnaround strategy. Signature programming was really kicking off. And also it was when we were making investments in our charter system model in the first couple of years of that. So we were doing cluster funds, flex funds out at the schools. So the times might be shifting. We might want to put that boat back on a funding stream and say now it's time to start restoring fund balance and making that a parameter, and we want to definitely make that a priority, but it has not been a priority in the last few years. The parameters that we've received is to stay within the 7.5% and 15%, which is what we've been doing.
I agree. I agree. Like I said, for the new board members, I remember those conversations very distinctly. I remember those conversations very distinctly because we did have to make some tough decisions on our investments. My last question is going to, I think, the discussion that we want to have in regards to the parameters, slide 20 and slide 21. And I know there's been conversations about investments across the district, but also kind of rethinking some of these priorities. And so as I listen to, I guess, some of the dialogue and would love to hear some more about it. Marie, Dr. C, I know you stated that to really address some of the deeper issues, the concentrated poverty, which I think we've heard this every year, that it would take a change of these parameters. But when I look through things like number 6, in regards to distributing funding equitably to drive innovation autonomy, for more accountability, investments to pre-K through 3rd grade, whole child development, positive behavior supports, things of that nature, but also the investment college and career academies, a lot of those things that have happened. And Erica, I don't know if you remember the map that shows the investment, the dollars invested has actually been more on the south and west side than on the east and the north. So my question to all of us is, as we look at these parameters, what in fact do we want? I'm fine with looking at some of these. I think the next level of the conversation is, how does this actually play out with the current budget, where we are, and how, not aggressive, but how firm we want to go to address these things. My 2 question is, Maria, so when you say changing the parameters, what does that look like, number 1? And then number 2, just kind of hearing from everyone, discussion on these a little bit more deeper than just picking out, and a little bit more deeper than what we just had.
Mr. Chair, members of the board member Collins. Yeah, so you said maybe not the word aggressive, but firm. But I do think, we have had a lot of work done to get APS back on track. Then work done to accelerate and build capacity as quickly as possible to try to get progress and gains at a healthy pace that didn't send us back to old culture or behavior that would lead us down the path of the culture of the cheating scandal. So it's been a careful balance of challenging and giving resources without tipping the scale in the wrong way around the culture we were trying to change. At the same time, though, the aggressive piece, I think, is true. I mean, I think at this point, given
the gap itself, how it cuts on socioeconomic and race lines. And what I am reading from some board members, that we need to close the gap faster, that the pace wasn't fast enough, even though we've been lifting the top and the bottom, then you're going to have to change your approach. And I do think it is more aggressive. So what we see here are parameters that serve like all schools. It is an approach that tries to lift every school in APS. If you want to get to the deeper issues of equity based on geographic area of this city, race, or socioeconomics, you are going to have to change the parameters into things that specifically talk about those things. So you are going to have to say that in X area of the district, we are deliberately putting in more resources, time, people, money, changing SPLOS, whatever. I don't know however you want to look at it, but you are actually going to have to say that. What I don't think will fly with the community is lip service to equity. If we're going to do it, you need to do it. So you can't keep down a path of, we've been, like I said, changing the funding formula so it has weights, but it has weights for all schools. It doesn't have weights that actually target areas that people are saying now are more important than ever. So if you're going to do that, you actually have to say it. And I'd also say, you do the same thing. Like I wrote one because I wanted to be prepared for tonight. Mine says the district will make investments to eliminate the racial achievement gap. To me, that is a much more clear statement than anything else. That means you are going to do investments where large numbers of black kids are in school. You could layer on South. You could layer on particular clusters if you wanted to. You could even go into grade level or content areas. So I wrote one that said the district will make investments to ensure every child is reading on grade level by the 3rd grade. That to me says you're going to go in hard on everything that's before the 3rd grade. And we lay that out and you double down your investment. So that does to me change, us saying we're providing additional supports across the board. If you really want to lift, then you have to say what you want to do. I'm going to circulate the article, but there's the latest research is saying to shrink the achievement gap, you've got to integrate schools. It is no longer possible to get the kind of gap closing you have to do in urban America without looking at socioeconomics and race to have more like real engagement support for students to be able to lift themselves and lift a school. Atlanta has deep racial divides, deep socioeconomic divides. If we're going to do this equity work, it's going to get real. It's going to get really real. And it's easy to talk about until you actually have to do something about it. And so I tried to write for myself, so I could say, it would say something like the district will address concentrated poverty to close the achievement gap. And what does that look like? And what are we willing to do about that? And we've got some projects out there where we've tried to do some of that work, but y'all have seen it, even in the Woodson Park project. It is an everyday, every month lift, and it's been going on since 2016. So to get that kind of work done requires time, serious investment, and confronting some of the long-standing hot issues in APS that deal with the kind of divides we have in this city. And so I tried to write some to force myself to think about what I meant by it. And I think maybe for the 17th, everybody could try to do that, and then we could see where there's alignment or something, and then try to craft and shape parameters that would drive this equity conversation. But the policy that's written is significant.
and could make a real difference for areas of our community. How do we take that and write it in a budget parameter, I think would be the real challenge for us. But it would be a very bold statement about how you would move forward and could get the kind of change that you desire.
I think that in response to that and related to Ishay's question is that it would be helpful to have from you, Dr. Kastarfin, what examples of that are. I mean, you gave us one, you gave us two. If we're going to be considering these, then I'd rather have board members react to what the administration believes is the aggressive based on our equity policy, because the direction came from our equity policy. And I think that it will be helpful for you to take that policy and say, okay, based on this policy, here are my recommendations, here are my administration's suggestions on expenditure, on revenue, and have the board react to that and adjust that. So I think in preparation for the 17th, that'd be helpful, because otherwise, I mean, board members are gonna, I mean, we could spend all day coming up with various ideas, some that are in our lanes, some that are not, and I'd much rather prefer for the administration to take our policy, take that guidance, and give us the recommendations based on that.
Well, my follow-through to that was the fact that these issues that we're talking about, we've been talking about them, and every year we've done something to chip away at them. So when I hear this, I kind of align it more with a strategic priority that then an expenditure parameter aligns with it to be funded, that like what we talked in the strategic plan. And I still think it still should be listed here, but I definitely think looking at it as a fiscal year expenditure, for me, is not the comfortable place for me or appropriate place that I see it. I really truly see it as a strategic process where every year we are like really addressing it aggressively. So that was just my thoughts on that.
Yep. Mr. Chair, members of the board, in response to that, I just, as Lisa described in the past, what we have done with the board, you used the one about the being on the different
Funding streams.
The funding streams. We've done that exercise with the board. The board sets the parameters. We give you the information for you to do it. It is board guidance. So I am happy to do our part as an administration, but I still believe, given some of the very public statements about expenditures, about expectations around where resources are going, around the conversation with equity, my work is inside the task force. I will definitely bring what we think, but I still challenge the board to be clear and participate and take the time between now and the Budget Commission meeting to do your part in creating parameters for both expenditure and revenue if necessary. So we don't ever do these alone for just for a reaction from the board. We have typically built these together, and this is a shift from past years. So yes, we have been honing and tweaking these over time, and if we're going to make a shift in preparation for next year, the shift, given that people have been very vocal inside and outside the district, it would be only fair and I think informative to help me shape parameters if board members over the next week would send their thoughts to us for us to be able to take that and shape it in a way so that it's not just reacting to the administration, but that you are capturing your values, your interest, the things that are of importance to you and the community, so that we can try to work something out that is collaborative and will be reflective. And I'm happy to receive those and then put them together in a way so everybody can see each other's work in time for the 17th. So we will do our part, absolutely. I will follow the guidance, but I do think that the board needs to weigh in before the 17th.
Appreciate that. And just to be clear, it's more than reacting. What I was reacting to there was the fact that the suggestion was made that these parameters would have to shift dramatically based on our equity policy. So if they do, I think there needs to be some work done and some recommendations based on that change in policy to help guide the board in what these parameters should do, which is not different than what we've done in the past, and would continue the work that we've done together in terms of crafting what these parameters have been and how they've changed over the years. So if we're going to do something dramatic, then I'm with it, but I want to make sure that since the board has given guidance to the equity policy, that we are then receiving feedback based on that policy from the administration so that we can bounce that information off each other and ultimately get to parameters that work for all of us. Nancy?
So just so I'm clear, what you're saying is you don't want the board any longer to give direction in the parameter expenditure and revenue? No?
That is exactly the opposite of what I said. What I am saying is, I heard the suggestion that these parameters, based on board feedback, based on the equity policy, should change or could change dramatically. And what I'm asking is, instead of having board members go on different paths, what would be most productive is based on based on the feedback that you've gotten from the board, and in particular the equity policy, make some suggestions based on that feedback that you've already received, so that the board can then come back and react to that, whether it's going in the right direction or not. But the board has given feedback on this primarily through the equity policy. And we've seen this in other meetings where certain board members have stated, okay, well, the equity policy is in place. How has this changed given the policy that we now have in effect? And I think that what you're hearing me say is, I'd like to see, based on your equity policy, if we implement the spirit and the text of this policy, here's what it would look like in terms of our resource and revenue parameters. And the board can then say, yes, that's similar, here are some other things, or no, not what we were thinking, here are these other things that we should be thinking about. So it's, again, I don't see it as a difference than what we've done in the past. It's not like board members may have contributed word for word writing some of these, but these are historically been general concepts that we've talked about. And for me, it's no different. The equity policy is in place. Let's see some recommendations based on that very significant policy.
And I'm still requesting that board members think about the parameters and please send any of your thoughts in advance, as we have done in the past multiple times in preparation for budget parameter conversations. That would be very helpful to us to get a sense of potential directions we could take all of this in. And I want to just add one very specific example, because Cynthia Briscoe Brown and I talked about it in her 101. You had very strong ideas about the fund balance. You had very strong ideas about a potential recession, so on and so forth. And the way it's written right now is a very standard way. You noodling that one resource parameter based on your view about the future and what you're concerned about with the recession, and if that should change, would be very helpful to me. So that's just one example. And I know that Erica and I have had very deep conversations about resources as it relates to the south of the city. So I do believe there are some people, maybe not all, who could inform this in a way that would elevate the conversation, especially around equity. So I will hopefully get something that would help us prepare a useful set of resource and expenditure parameters like we've done in the past.
Any other discussion on this topic? Yes.
Kind of point on this, which is perhaps it might be helpful as we're thinking about this process to put parameters around the parameters themselves and think about the format that we want to remain somewhat consistent to with respect to how we're phrasing the parameters and the how specific or granular we want to get within each parameter. So, thinking about, for example, the difference between parameter 6, that's one that begins with in support of the charter system model, comma, there potentially could be 8 different separate parameters within that meaty one, none of which uses the word, for example, invest, or well, I think there's the investment as part of that, but there's not consistency with how we're drafting parameters, and I think that perhaps might be helpful in the exercise that we're all contemplating now, which is to say that, for example, if our parameters should be worded like Dr. Karstafin's suggestions, such that they say to invest in X by doing Y, that could be a helpful formula. And to that, we could also perhaps think about doing a table or a chart that has a parameter, maybe a column for what's required. If we really want to get fancy, we could have a column for research that supports that idea, et cetera. And then maybe that will help guide. And by the way, we have a lot of what I'm hearing here is probably in
Right.
this.
That's,
But maybe
yeah.
once we
Mhm.
think about it in this a little bit more formulaic framework, it will kind of be disaggregated in a way that solves a lot of the problems and helps us focus on looking at it a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, to your point, like that's pretty much when I pulled number 6, what I was stating, like there, the parameter seems to encompass these things. If there is a little bit more for clarity, I think to Dr. C's point is addressing that where everybody, and I understand where everybody is clear, because a lot of the issues that have been raised from a budgetary fund balance piece, and I appreciate Lisa and the team really diving in to pull all this together, is news to me as well. So I want to, as a board member, want to be as responsive as well to make sure that that is all reflective for everyone. So I agree with you on that.
Any other comments, questions?
I would just say that not all districts do these parameters, and it's definitely a best practice, and it's something, I'm a member of GFOA and ASBO and lots of different committees, and the fact that we do this is something that I use as a benchmark when I'm training other districts on managing their budget process. So it is a very excellent step, and I'm glad that we do it. If I could get some additional insight, I know there was a request for us to bring data to the Budget Commission meeting. Some parameters around what data we need to be providing, because your budget process runs the gamut of everything that we do here. And it's very easy to get bogged down and have a data overload when parameters are really about forward thinking and an annual expenditure, right? So what will we put in this FY 2021 budget to really move the dial for specific issues that we're looking at. So that would be if we can get some focus on what data we should be providing so that we can build those benchmark metrics for next year.